I better rename that. I don't think she wants that.
All right. Good. Okay. So you guys ready? Good. Good afternoon and welcome to the 11th meeting of the City Council Street Renaming Commission. Council staff, please proceed with the roll call.
Sure. Commissioner Connor, present. Commissioner Raymond, present. Commissioner Sterbko, present. Commissioner Hamilton, absent. Commissioner Jackson, absent. Commissioner Bayham, absent. Commissioner Hill, present. Commissioner Jones-Williams, absent. And Commissioner Westmoreland, absent. We have 4 members. We do not have a quorum yet, but we can proceed with the opening speech and the roll call.
Thank you very much. The COVID-19 pandemic continues to preclude us from meeting safely in a public forum. We must therefore continue to operate in this virtual fashion using public comment guidelines outlined by the Louisiana Attorney General. Here are the public comment rules that we will follow today. At the beginning of the meeting, staff will read the agenda for today's meeting in its entirety. That agenda is also online at council.nola.gov. That's council.nola.gov. We will then recess for 10 minutes to allow citizens to submit written comments for any agenda item. Anyone wishing to comment should go to council.nola.gov and fill out an online public comment form. Only written public comments will be accepted. Public comment will be limited to 1 comment per person per item. Comments should also be limited to 2 minutes when read aloud and be germane to the agenda item at hand. Public comment will be closed at the end of the 10-minute public comment period. No written comments will be accepted beyond that point. Before voting on an agenda item, council staff will read any public comment received for a pending agenda item. Mr. Carter or Andrew, would you please read the agenda in full?
Sure. Agenda. Item 1, roll call. Item 2, recess to receive public comment. Item 3, approval of the minutes from the January 27th, 2021 meeting. Item 4, expert panel update. Report from panel of historians on work to date. Item 5, initial report update. Item 6, final report recommendations. Vote by commissioners on renaming recommendations to be placed in final report to council. Item 7, stakeholder engagements. Report from commissioners on stakeholder engagement to date. Item 8, adjournment.
Thank you. And with that, we will take a 10-minute break for public comment.
We'll be back here at 3:14.
Thank you very much.
And commissioners, that's been 10 minutes.
Thank you very much. Would you redo the roll call for me, please?
Absolutely. Just as a heads up, I'm getting some emails from commissioners who are having trouble getting in. I'm trying to resolve that right now.
Okay, perfect.
So we have Commissioner Connor present, Commissioner Raymond present, Commissioner Sturбko present, Commissioner Westmoreland absent, Commissioner Hamilton,
Present.
Commissioner Jackson absent, Commissioner Bayham absent, Commissioner Hill,
Present.
and Commissioner Jones-Williams absent. We have 5 members. We have a quorum.
Thank you very much.
Andrew, I think Commissioner Westmoreland might have gotten on.
Yeah, I was just going to say this.
Commissioner Westmoreland has joined us. So we have 6 members. We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. The remainder of the agenda will be our first quorum discussion on the listed items. Commissioners, your feedback is welcome as we progress as usual and encouraged strongly today, actually. Commissioners, you received a copy of the minutes from the January 27th meeting. Are there any corrections or questions? Hearing none. Andrew, were there any public comments on the minutes?
I do not believe so. Sorry, I'm just bringing it up right now. Is there one? Give me 1 second here.
Sure.
No, does not look like it. Nope.
Okay, if there are no corrections or comments, excuse me, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as distributed.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been properly moved and second that we approve the minutes as distributed. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Abstentions? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Item 4, expert panel update, report from our panel of historians on the work to date. Of course, our expert panel is consistently, as we always say, and diligently continued researching the New Orleans streets and updates and recommendations to share based on their ongoing research, as well as feedback that they have received from the community. I want to thank again Sue Mobley and Thomas Adams for their team for all their hard work. They have been thorough and responsive as usual. And I will ask for Sue or Thomas, whichever of you would like to start, to give us a quick update.
Hi, all. I'll be taking the first round of our update today, though Thomas and I are both here, as always, to answer any questions or offer comments as we go. We are currently having submitted the report of the 44 participants who proposed 3 names each for the streets under consideration, are taking individual public comments and requests of the commission for additional research, additional names and additional locations, and sharing them out amongst our core panel of experts team. I know that there were questions raised at the last meeting as to who that team consisted of, and so I would like to again say that the panel of experts is Dr. Thomas Adams, Dr. Roseanne Adderley, Dr. Fallon Idu, Malik Bartholomew, Dr. Aaron Greenwald, Dr. Roshana Johnson, Dr. Elizabeth Manley, Beverly Mckenna, Dr. Molly Mitchell, Dr. Kara Aldridge, Dr. Roshana Johnson, Dr. Adolph Reed Jr., Dr. Cody Roberts, and myself. That is my update for the moment. Y'all.
Thomas, do you have something you want to add, or?
No, I think that's it for us for today, for that in regards to that.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Commissioners, do you have any questions or of the experts at this point? Hearing none. Andrew, are there any comments to this?
Yes, there are. Yep. Okay.
Andrew, I can tackle these.
Okay. I'm going to pass this off to Paul for some of these. Thank you, Paul.
All right.
We've got 22 comments on this. First comment is from Charles Gibson. The mayor and city council continue their war on American culture by removing and renaming a wide array of iconic thoroughfares. Even worse, a good portion of these streets have nothing to do with the Civil War and even predate the conflict by many decades. The out-of-town Australia to be exact, students erroneously assigned to do the committee and council's research have committed a series of errors regarding the labeling and renaming process. This means the renaming commission and the city council is operating on literal false information. Alfred Hardwin. Renaming of New Orleans Street is absolutely ridiculous. Do you realize the problems this is going to cause? Let the street names alone and concentrate on more important issues. Crime is running rampant on our streets. How's about looking into black on black crime, which is a serious problem? So many young lives being wasted. Are not these more important issues to address? Biden claims he wants all Americans to come together. Changing the names of the streets are only dividing us. Please study our history before taking any further action to rename streets. Concentrate on more important issues. Whatever happened to common sense? Kirk Grove. For over 200 years, New Orleans has been an American city. For over 300 years, it has been one with European and African descendants. For many more centuries, perhaps millennia, it has been occupied or visited by indigenous peoples. With some planning and good luck, I hope it is enjoyed for centuries more. Though there seems to be some urgent need for social justice and the correction of past choices, I strongly suggest this body keep things in perspective and proceed slowly. Please humbly recognize that today's choices will also have a lasting effect. Those same changes are clearly due. They must not be rushed. Thank you. Pamela Schaefer. I oppose the renaming of streets for the reasons of removing historical names, regardless of who or how many people have hurt feelings. History is part of any culture, whether you like it or not. We all need to learn from history so you can improve society. The cancel culture does nothing but further divide us. If you want to honor newer historical figures who have contributed to our city, then rename streets that have generic names. Anne Long. The historians seem to have confused after whom some streets were named, such as Leonidas and Penn Streets, which are thought to be named for Greek king Leonidas of Sparta and Alexander Gordon Penn instead of the other historical figures, Leonidas Polk and Davidson Penn. I'm not sure what other errors have been made, but I feel an accurate and validated historical review of the names is needed before any vote to change any street name or place. Peter Lesses. I strongly disagree with the renaming of streets. There are at least 3 that are misconstrued. Tivoli Circle refers to a kind of circus and indirectly to the Italian community. Penn also has nothing to do with the Civil War and came before it. Leonidas was a Greek figure, more in keeping with the Mardi Gras tradition and the floats than anything having to do with Leonidas K. Polk. And even if it did, I would oppose the renaming. I understand that there are Australians on the committees who know little about U.S. history. Timothy Brinks. Is there any update from the panel on its additional research into the origins of General Taylor Street? Questions about the namesake for that street have been raised at the last 2 public meetings. And at the most recent meeting, researcher Thomas Adams advised that he would take the questions about General Taylor Street back to the panel. I look forward to hearing the results of the panel's follow-up research on General Taylor Street and its origins. Robert Wyman. Apparently some of the quote-unquote experts' work is in error, including work on Penn and Leonidas, and should not be relied upon until validated. That being said, I am against changing historic, cultural, or iconic street names. Revisionist history is hurtful, not inclusive. William Mason. If the entire street renaming initiative is based on replacing streets named after quote-unquote white supremacists, what evidence exists that these individuals in which streets are in question were definitely quote-unquote white supremacists? And what evidence exists that it was the intent of the city at the time to name streets after quote-unquote white supremacists? Nick Chetta. I am a long-term resident of Lakeview and have traversed Robert E. Lee Boulevard thousands of times. Other noteworthy former long-term neighbors who have traversed this street at least as much and also lived in the area were Al Hurt, Pete Fountain, and Harry Connick, all of which have contributed to the worldwide recognition of New Orleans music culture. I respectfully suggest their names be considered when renaming our local Lakeview streets. Regards, Nick Chetta. Carmen Carter. Does anyone have an accounting of what the proposed street renaming will cost and where the money will come from? I have read in some cities the cost of over $500,000 per street. Curious as I watch people stand in soup lines unable to feed their families and pay household expenses due to the pandemic and resulting unemployment. I think the city should reevaluate priorities. A street name versus the welfare of a living human being. Pamela Stevens. Thank you for your effort to make our city's streets reflect the diversity of people who have contributed so much over the generations. We should not glorify racist leaders and the racism and divisiveness they've promoted by keeping their names on public streets or buildings or monuments or other public entities. Stan Richard. I'm once again informing you that Drew Street is named after the Drew brothers, Mathurin and Pierre. At the last meeting, you gave information from Grace King about the Drew brothers and their help with the founding of New Orleans. Here are 3 more references stating that Drew Street was named after the brothers who died 89 years before the Civil War started. New Orleans Nostalgia, Remembering New Orleans History, Culture, and Traditions by Ned Hemard. The Drew holdings stayed in family hands for generations, and today a street honors the 2 brothers. Originally named St. James Street from Elysian Fields to Peoples Avenue, it was renamed Drew Avenue in 1924. Here's an article from the Times-Picayune. Drew Avenue home team stages a comeback. Stephanie Bruno, January 30th, 2010. Okay, so I know the Drew family avenue in Gentilly Terrace isn't really named for New Orleans Saints quarterback Drew Brees. I know it actually honors Pierre and Mathurin Drew, the Frenchmen who selected land along the Bayou Sauvage Ridge, established a plantation there, and then named it Gentilly. The Preservation Resource Center of New Orleans also states the same thing in their info about the Gentilly Terrace neighborhood. In this neighborhood, it is also known as Drew Street in honor of French colonists Mathurin and Pierre Drew, who established their plantation here. It seems that my comments about Drew Street fell on deaf ears during the last meeting. You need to reconsider renaming this street. Shannon Scott. As a historian, I find it highly unusual and unorthodox that for a city which throughout its history has had such strong cultural identity, has been a true melting pot and is the very epitome and embodiment of the true word diversity, that it has enlisted not only non-citizens for such a widespread and integral cultural action for NOLA, but literally non-countrymen, and dare I say worse, but also students who, to my understanding, have no cultural affiliation to the city of New Orleans. I would find it equally absurd if I'd heard that there were Louisiana students involved with the renaming of the streets of Sydney or Hong Kong. Granted, anyone can use the internet or a library or be offered resources from, say, New Orleans archives, but we have already seen, quote unquote, the gap or failure of this enterprise eking out in the misrepresentation of those who were the namesakes of Penn Street, Leonidas Street, for example. The people of New Orleans of every walk should be insulted that if this is meant to be such an important undertaking above all sorts of challenges for the city and city government, that they were not asked to form a committee in some sort of process where the actual citizenship and residents whose tax dollars pay for the streets and their costly renaming would be involved first and foremost, especially since the effort has been pitched as one of advancing actual diversity or healing old wounds and other rationales. If one is banking or bringing people together in a mutual effort or unifying them to a cause, it is certainly not the way to go about it. Just on its face, common sense would direct as much. The fact that the city's mayor and others did not more than suggest that the people of New Orleans were overlooked, brushed off, and intended to be ignored. Any self-respecting local should reject the current process out of hand. Melvin Schneider. Thank you and your team for your hard work and effort. Penn Street newspaper articles have been found dating the paving of the street to 1848 and sales of lots of the street dating to 1850. It is most likely this street was named for an early postmaster of New Orleans with the Penn name rather than any soldiers in the Civil War, especially since the street existed well before the Civil War. Please remove the street from renaming consideration or enter into the record that its ties to the Civil War are controversial and should require more research before determination is made one way or the other. In the last meeting, Commissioner Connor, I believe, made some incredible points about Beauregard's legacy and work after the war. Unlike the statue, which depicts Beauregard in a Confederate uniform, neither Beauregard Street on the CCSRC's website attaches general before the street name. I humbly ask that the commission consider leaving his name on those streets as an educational and context lesson going forward. The streets could be considered in memory of his activism after the war or public service via public works in modern times and for future generations. The Washington Artillery has served in the Mexican War, World War I, World War II, and Global War on Terror. Considering their honorable service across so many conflicts, it is very short-sighted, in my opinion, to rename anything associated with them based on the review of one brief time frame. Please reconsider removing them from the renaming report or including a complete and accurate history of all of their service for review rather than cherry-picking certain events. 4 streets in my neighborhood of Lakeview, Lane, Bragg, Mouton, and Walker, are named for service of individuals in the Mexican War, not the Civil War. I live in a block bound by Walker and Mouton, and I drive these streets daily. Please consider removing these streets from the list as they are names for Mexican War service rather than the Civil War. Oliver Pollock. The panel of so-called experts and historians is anything but what it claims to be. Each and every committee member, most notably Mr. Westmoreland, have expressed a negative view of our city's history and its cultural icons. If the purpose of the committee is to explore and decide on the historical and cultural validity of certain street names, shouldn't we be assuming non-biased members, or shouldn't we be assigning non-biased members with this task of those instead of those with publicly known political agenda? Furthermore, the actual research done by the committee was not actually done by the committee itself. Instead, they have delegated their responsibility to students who live quite literally on the other side of the world in Australia. These students, who are absolutely not professionals, have committed a series of errors in their reports. Falsifications assign incorrect namesakes to historical streets and erases the legacy of people who not only had nothing to do with the American Civil War or white supremacy, but have positively impacted our locality, nation, and world. The misguided view of the elite few are dictating the pace and policy of the literal renaming of our streets, thoroughfares, and public spaces. Even worse, this historical revisionism is spurred on out of town moneyed interests rather than the actual locals themselves. Even worse, the proposed replacement names are merely contemporary cultural figures who will fade away into obscurity once this generation passes away. It is more than fair to say that the names of cooks, brass instrument players, and relatively unknown writers do not come close to comparing to the actual builders, founders, and architects of our fair city, state, and nation. This attempt to rename our streets exists purely as a Marxist purge of anything that does not agree with the current party line. I understand that the powers that be on the council and the committee do not understand the gravity of warnings issued by Orwell in 1984 and Solzhenitsyn in the Gulag Archipelago. In fact, I am more than sure that they have never read of these books, much less heard of them. For if they had, they would realize that...
Paul, that's 2 minutes.
Thank you. We have, looks like 5 more comments on this item.
Okay, thank you.
Charles Marsala. Thank you, commissioners, for your time. Regarding the expert panel update report, I sent you emails earlier today with images I am now going to reference. The motion to create this commission stated to remedy the mistreatment and sometime violent mistreatment of immigrants. What is proposed to meet the motion as a remedy? The report of the panel of historians should mention the 1891 lynching of Italians and the laws and ordinances passed against Italians working on the docks. The Italian community has a wonderful history of contributing to New Orleans, producing many names that would qualify for streets. The commission might want to also consider using the names of the towns of Sicily. Francesco de Pinedo landed on the Mississippi River in a seaplane 2 months before Lindbergh crossed the Atlantic. Italians started food firms that went national, such as Progresso Foods and Luxury Pasta. There is Louis Prima, who wrote and performed the song Sing, 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 which acquired by Benny Goodman in 1936. Mother Cabrini's orphanage opened in 1892 during yellow fever. Victor Schiro was mayor and lived on Robert E. Lee Boulevard. I sent you information that February 17th in 1865 is the day the governor signed the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery. That vote in Louisiana was 53 to 47% to secede, or 19,000 to 17,000 in 1861. I believe you will find that at Jackson Barracks, the streets named after Beauregard and Lee were done to honor their Mexican-American War service and living at the barracks for a time. Does it make sense to remove streets honoring Mexican-American war heroes? Thomas Hughes. The members that make up this panel are very one-sided. This is reverse discrimination and will further cause more people who used to be New Orleans residents to leave the city due to the overreaction to trying to rename many streets that have nothing to do with the Civil War. Hope Phelps. As a lifelong resident of New Orleans and graduate of the all-girls school on Robert E. Lee Boulevard. I support renaming all Confederate streets. I'm against splitting street names. Renaming some streets is the least we could do to respect and honor our Black neighbors. Dr. Jeffrey Darrensburg. I would like something in the city to be named Bulbancha, the city's original name. Here's an article about it, of which there are many. Best wishes. And he includes a link that will be part of the public record. The last comment is from Cynthia Bridges. I commend the commission on their work so far, but their actions do not go far enough. It is great we will no longer carry the weight of having streets named for men who risk their wealth or lives in service to other Louisianans. We shouldn't be naming streets after capitalist icons like Leah Chase or Alan Toussaint, who use their skills to enrich themselves with money. If we really want the street names to reflect modern day New Orleans, we should name streets for things like murder, shootings, crime, carjackings, bad streets, bad water infrastructure, corrupt politicians, bad education, midnight basketball, school lunch programs, summer lunch programs, EBT cards, housing vouchers, evictions, free utilities, Destroya, the Hard Rock, not prosecuting criminals, cash bail elimination, a jailbird DA, tear gas, and kneeling police. Then we will have equity. That is the last comment on this item.
Thank you very much. Sue Mobley wanted to make some comments well, she's back, but I want to ask Andrew a question first. I did this the last meeting as well. As far as you know, the city continues to operate in all other areas, including the public service needs that it needs to meet for the citizens, correct?
Yes, that is correct. We have a council meeting tomorrow that will cover a number of topics as were suggested in these comments.
And it is still occurring with employees who are currently furloughed, correct?
That is correct. There are employees who have taken a 10% pay cut or are on furlough who currently still work 100% of their jobs.
And we're not exhausting any of the assets from those particular endeavors for this commission, which is voluntary. Correct.
That is correct.
Thank you very much. Sue?
Well, that was a lovely exploration of QAnon talking points. And I think that one of the things that council should take up as a recommendation out of this process would be a requirement that people give not just their names and addresses, but their affiliations with organizations such as Identity Acadia, the Proud Boys, R.E. Lee Monumental Association, and the Hayride when giving comments, because whether those are formally their jobs or not, clearly that is who they are speaking on behalf of. Now, if people had engaged with the reports rather than Charles Marsala and Richard Marksbury's mailers to solicit comments from people across the country, they would know that Leonidas and Walker have both been removed from the list of recommendations, thanks to the panel of experts taking into consideration public comment. In response to Louis Prima, he is on page 19 of the report. Another Italian, Woody Gagliano, is on page 26 and was recommended for Beauregard Avenue. The use of students as researchers on history and historiographic projects is how we train a new generation of historians who read books rather than Wikipedia and who bring projects and scholarship into the future. There were 44 scholars on top of the 16 on the panel of experts who contributed to the report of the panel of experts. They represent Dillard, Loyola, SUNO, UNO, Tulane, Xavier, LSU, McNeese State, Michigan State, University of California at Berkeley, University of Chicago, University of Illinois, Chicago, University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, University of Pennsylvania, myself included, University of Wisconsin-Madison. It was not a group of children from Australia. It was not a group of non-citizens, and let's be careful with the use of the word citizens, who wrote this report. It was scholars who are invested in this city and its history, in global histories of war, of race, of place, of this nation's history, who wrote this report. And to denigrate the scholarship that was done because you found a disagreement in something you pulled off the internet would be laughable if it weren't so incredibly damaging and if it weren't so deeply tied to an anti-science, anti-expertise agenda that is driving this country into a dysfunctional, authoritarian state. So I will be very glad when this process ends and y'all can go back to anti-masking and screaming at your politicians. But what you're not going to do is be up in this public process talking about LaToya the Destroyer and Joe Biden's Marxist agenda. Bring it back to sanity and to the streets that are under consideration and read the damn report. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. And to the general public, you know, as you can see that those types of comments that are, as Sue rightfully pointed out, mostly uninformed, particularly this comments about Australians working on this report primarily, it strikes a nerve because there are many people who have volunteered to do this process who live right here in this city. The majority of us are right here in this city. And the use of scholarship from folks who operate at other universities is not a problem. It actually helps so that we don't come up with these facts in a bubble. And we, you know, in fairness, you know, we don't often and are not trying to defend anything against public comments here, but I understand completely Sue's passion about this, given the time and commitment that they have made, as well as the openness to comments from others, from citizens of the city after we published the first report. So as we move forward in this meeting, I would like us to, you know, have our comments, you know, when they are blatantly wrong, we can make those corrections. And I think that, you know, as we move forward, we can also stick to the conversation about the actual scholarship in streets as opposed to the individuals who may be submitting things specifically. So we move on to agenda item number 5, the initial report update. So in November 2020, we voted on the initial renaming recommendations to the City Council. We have continued stakeholder engagement meetings since then and have been given the following recommendations, which we will consider along with any others that the commissioners so choose. I'd like to note for the public that the following list includes recommendations that we have received since publishing our initial report. Any suggestions submitted prior thereto have already been weighed by the commission and included in the initial report voting. A spreadsheet including all submissions through the nolaCCSRC.org website will be attached to our final report, and any comments made during these commission meetings are already a part of the record and available for the City Council to peruse if they need to once they get the report from us. So commissioners, I forwarded to you all a listing of the recommendations. We went through some of them last week. I will quickly go through them again. Just note that we will be voting on whichever of these you choose to address in the next agenda item. So for the record, Beauregard Avenue is a current street name that we are looking at. The initial recommendation is Sherwood Woody Gagliano. We have received reconsideration requests to make the street instead an extension of Wisner Boulevard or James E. Jimmy Fitzmaurice. Conrad Street was newly added to replace Walker at the last meeting because we removed Walker from the list. And the suggestion is that that street take the old Walker suggestion of Jasper. And then we received a recommendation for reconsideration to also have that maybe as James E. Jimmy Fitzmaurice. Locke Street, we have the suggestions of Melanie Diefendahl, Michael Mizell Nelson, Charles McKenna, and James E. Jimmy Fitzmaurice. Just so you know that the Fitzmaurice name was recommended for any of the lakefront streets. Pardon me, I'm not Robert E. Lee Boulevard. was suggested to be renamed Allen Toussaint Boulevard. The reconsideration requests that we received were to name the street Toussaint in District D and Hibernia in the portions of the street that are in District A. We also received a suggestion of Pete Fountain, Giuseppe Garibaldi, John Quincy Adams, which would be a reversion to a former name of the street, Andrew Higgins, Mount Carmel, James Jimmy Fitzmaurice, or Chief Willie McCrossan, who's a former fire chief here in New Orleans. Governor Nichols, which has been recommended in the initial report as Lolis Edward Eli. We received reconsideration requests for Hospital Street, which would be a revision for at least a portion of that street. Oscar Dunn. Another recommendation was to split the street between Bayou Road and Hospital Street. Another is to name the entire stretch of Governor Nichols Bayou Road. Another is to reconsider Father Jerome Ledoux. Another was to reconsider using Lucille Levy Hutton, Cosimo Matassa, Salvatore Calatano, Captain Salvatore Pizzati, Philip Mazai, Dr. Louis Charles Rudney. For Penn Street, it's currently recommended that it be named Dr. Sarah Mayo. We received a request to reconsider the name Marcelle Noir, which is the poem that the experts provided previously. Capdeville, which the recommendation was Judge Ivan Lamel. We received reconsideration request for Rudney and Ortiq. For Tulane Avenue, which was recommended to be 2D Montana, we've received reconsideration request of Oscar Dunn and Captain Salvatore Pizzati. Semmes Street, Veronica Hill is the current suggestion. Reconsideration requests include Edwin Williams, which was an original request from the experts of a gentleman who was killed on that street by some sailors in a racial incident during the Civil Rights era, and the Algiers 7. Slidell Street, Henry James Red Allen is the current suggestion. Reconsideration request of Edwin Williams or Algiers 7 there as well. General Taylor, current suggestion is Professor Longhair. We received a request to rethink whether Taylor should be a street on the list at all, as it is believed to be named after General Zachary Taylor, not his son Richard Taylor, who was a Confederate general. General Ogden is currently named after Herman, or recommended to be named after Herman Midlow. We've been asked to take it off the list completely. Forshey Street, Charles Buddy Bolden is the current suggestion. We've been asked to remove that name from the list as well. Palmer Avenue, current suggestion, Edith Stern. We've been asked to reconsider naming that Earl Palmer Avenue instead. Patton Street is currently suggested to be renamed after Nils R. Douglas. We've received a request to consider renaming it after General George Patton. Lee Circle, current suggestion, Leah Chase Circle. Reconsideration options are concept allowing multiple honorees, Tivoli Circle, Bulbancho Way, World War II Circle, Veteran Circle, Andrew Jackson Higgins Circle, Unity Circle, Blaine Kern Circle, Mardi Gras Circle, Harmony Circle, Dorothy Mae Taylor Circle, Fats Domino Circle, Fleur De Lis Circle, and Ulysses Grant Circle. Palmer Park has been previously recommended that it be renamed John Minor Wisdom Park. The reconsideration suggestions, Earl Palmer Park, Dr. John Park. Washington Artillery Park, which we had not previously made a suggestion for naming, we have reconsideration asked for Oscar Dunn and or the 2nd Louisiana Native Guard. Are there any recommendations for changes not reflected in the listing that I read, commissioners, that you are aware of? Hearing none, we'll remind you, we will vote on any recommendations, these items on these items that you wish under the final report agenda, which is next. Keep in mind that this vote is to amend the initial report, which may still change based on comments that we will receive up until the date that we submit the final advisory report to the city council members, and could change even then if the council members choose to. Andrew, are there any, I'm sorry, commissioners, do you have any questions about this particular agenda item? We will have the full discussion as we go to the next item. Andrew, are there
I
any
just
comments?
wanted to make a point
Yes, sir.
quickly. I wanted to let you know, I want to let everybody know that I had received, after the Walker Conrad switch, I have received a lot of feedback, particularly on Conrad, that folks are interested in the Mount Carmel, or I think I'm pronouncing this correctly, Chevrel name. Julie Chevrel was a sister who founded Mount Carmel out in Lakeview in the 1800s. And I just want to let you know, because I don't know that any of that made public emails, but I personally received emails and phone calls, the vast majority of which were centered on some type of Mount Carmel renaming for Conrad.
Thank you very much, Paul. And we can have further discussion about that under the next agenda item.
Yep.
Commissioners, do you all have any other questions about the recommendations we received or additional additions that you may have gotten? Hearing none, Andrew, would you please read public comment? How many do we have on this section?
Let me look.
I'm sure we've got about 15 on this one.
Yeah, that's about right.
I'll go ahead and cover it.
Okay.
First comment is from James Carlisle. In the past month, the commission has voted on a number of significant changes to its initial report concerning the streets in Lakeview, most significantly the addition of Conrad and Locke Streets to the list of streets to be renamed. However, as of yesterday, February 9th, the CCSRC website still does not mention anywhere that those streets are being considered for renaming. Conrad and Locke are not listed on the website's map, nor are they mentioned anywhere in any of the reports or addenda available on the website. Moreover, no emails or notices were sent out by the commission after they voted to add these two streets to the list, nor were any public meetings held with the neighborhoods or with those who live on those streets. In short, no effort was made to publicize the addition of these new streets, nor was any effort made to notify the public of this decision or actively solicit their feedback or renaming suggestions. At this point, the commission's Zoom meeting is the only thing that could possibly be considered public notice of its intention to rename Conrad and Locke Streets. The last Zoom meeting has only been viewed 65 views according to YouTube, and the one before that was only viewed 120 times. The commission has repeatedly referred citizens to its website as the authoritative source for everything about this process, and neighborhood organizations who have assisted the commission during the process of soliciting public input have done the same. The lack of any public notice or transparency about the late addition of Conrad and Locke Streets is disappointing to say the least, and it completely contradicts the commission's stated mission of prioritizing public input and soliciting feedback from the community. Given the utter lack of any attempt at public notice for these two streets, Conrad and Locke Street should be removed from consideration for renaming until the public has been properly notified and given an opportunity to provide feedback and participate in the process. Edward George. I'm a resident of Palmer Avenue. I oppose renaming Palmer Avenue Edith Stern Street. I admire and respect the many contributions Mrs. Stern has made to our city. However, she has no relationship to Palmer Avenue. Her philanthropy and her contributions to our city are celebrated elsewhere, including at Longview House and Gardens and in Pontchartrain Park. I would suggest further consideration of a rededication of Palmer Avenue to honor Earl Palmer, a celebrated musician from our city. Alternatively, I would request that Palmer Avenue be renamed to honor John Minor Wisdom, a highly respected jurist who lived on Palmer Avenue. Finally, if neither of those alternatives are acceptable, I would request consideration of renaming Palmer Avenue as University Avenue. With all due respect to Mrs. Stern and her legacy, Edith Stern Street is not euphonic, not historic, and inappropriate as a substitute for Palmer Avenue, particularly where there are more meaningful alternatives available. Robert Wyman. I understand that some of the expert research on this issue is wrong, including research on Penn and Leonidas. As to the issue, I am against changing historic, cultural, or iconic street names. Revisionist history is hurtful, not inclusive. Norman Trent Costa. I was born and grew up in the Ninth Ward. New Orleans is a city of rich history and culture. I still remember taking the bus with my grandmother, God bless her soul, to visit Lee Circle and Canal Street. I am opposed to renaming any streets. You have already did enough by removing iconic monuments. This is the same thing that happened in Russia after the Bolshevik Revolution in October 1917. The Bolsheviks took down czarist monuments, renamed streets, and even renamed cities. Is this what we want New Orleans to become? You see, I'm a real historian, not a revisionist fool like you guys have on this so-called commission. You cannot erase history, and this is not unifying the city. To the contrary, you are further dividing it. If you want to unify the city, keep the present history and add your revisionist stuff over time. In the meantime, you should focus on the city's main problem, black on black crime. Taking down iconic statues did not stop this problem, and I highly doubt renaming streets will. So stop acting like Bolsheviks and preserve our city and its heritage. If these streets are renamed, I will never spend another cent in New Orleans, and neither will my large group of friends and family for whom I also speak for. What's next? You guys are going to erect statues to Lenin and Stalin? Grow up and address the real problems in New Orleans like crime and trash. Leave history alone. Norman Trent Costa. William Mason. Judging yesterday's heroes and events by today's standards is a slippery slope with no logical conclusion. This cancel culture of removing statues and renaming streets does little to nothing to address real issues that affect our city like crime, education, infrastructure, homelessness, and jobs. It also destroys and removes our city's diverse history. New statues and streets should be built and named after new heroes, but the past is an education tool and should be preserved for future generations. Carmen Carter. This city is dying. Business is gone forever, and more to follow suit while a local government focuses on signage and symbolism. A chamber of commerce nightmare, short-sighted and zero common sense. The only signs I am concerned with are the lack of help wanted. Reverend Gregory T. Manning. I once again commend the Commission's extraordinary work. At the same time, I ask that the Commission would recognize the absence of the honoring of this sacred land named by our indigenous brothers and sisters as Bulbancha, the place of many languages. Isn't that who we are as New Orleanians? A city that welcomes and celebrates many tongues. Let Lee Circle be called Bulbancha Way so that every Mardi Gras parade and every tourist on the streetcar would recognize that Lee had to come down so that justice for all could be lifted up with a symbol of unity and diversity. Reminder, Mardi Gras Indians masked to honor the indigenous community who gave protection and aid to the enslaved. Bulbancha is not a street name, but in fact a way. Let's show the world who we are by renaming Lee Circle Bulbancha Way. In my opinion, this is our moment to attempt to atone for the sins of the past by choosing a truly meaningful and powerful name. Music, jazz, good, but not powerful enough to dismantle racism and white supremacy. Amanda Favre. I support the street name change for Mr. Douglas. He was a great man. Shannon Scott. There are clear failures in the fundamental approach to this expert panel in terms of outsourcing it to non-residents, non-citizens who cannot help to understand American culture, let alone one as complex as New Orleans. They have clearly erred in the reasons for renaming streets and for an effort flaunting itself as honoring cultural diversity, the renaming of Tivoli Square wholly repugnant to the Italian community and its contributions. Charles Marsala. Thank you, commissioners, for your time. Regarding the initial report update, as noted on page 95 of the initial report, identified that Tivoli Circle is the legal name. I've sent you messages in an email that the former Planning Commission, Walter Isaacson, tweeted last summer that the legal name is Tivoli Circle. I've sent you messages that a former director in the mayor's office started a petition that the name is Tivoli Circle. We have been promoted the inside land of the circle become a blue and good star memorial. That option was not described in the initial report. Having that piece of land dedicated to honoring veterans near the World War II Museum makes sense. Ms. Chase could be honored at Duncan Plaza. I would like to see each item you vote on as a separate agenda item. How is one to comment on 35 statues in 2 minutes? Thomas Hughes. The initial report update is a biased railroad effort designed to change the history of New Orleans. So sad what this is doing to one of America's most culturally rich cities.
Is that the last?
It is not. The next one is from Charles Marsala, who already provided a comment. Melvin Schneider. Please revise and remove Penn Street from the listing, as that street name dates to as early as 1848. There is no need to rename Walker, Mouton Lane, and Bragg Streets in Lakeview, as those streets are named for Mexican War service. It would be helpful if the commission's website was updated to reflect the research that has been emailed to all commissioners. I also humbly ask that Beauregard remain in place as general, not part of the street name, and the street does not specifically mention his military service. It should be interpreted as named in his honor for his activism and public works service after the Civil War. I also think it would be short-sighted to change the name of the Washington Artillery Park, Washington Square Park, as those who are named for the military service and sacrifices of men and women over hundreds of years, not merely a brief window of 10 or 20 years. The commission would be wise to recognize the full scope of the group's military service. With the prominence of Tulane University nationally, I think it would be wise to leave Tulane Avenue named as it is. Paul Tulane funded the university, and the commission's research states that this is what he is most well known for. The research states he donated lots of money to religious charities and educational charities. With the national prominence of Tulane University, it would be wise to keep the avenue that shares the name with the city's most prominent and most highly ranked educational institution. Jean-Baptiste. Treme has to go. It's perhaps the most abusive of all street names in New Orleans. Treme Street is named for Claude Treme, a man who seized slaves belonging to another man and was also documented murdering at least one slave. The politicians of New Orleans have unjustly forced Black residents to live in a neighborhood named for a slave owner and slave murderer. Any inkling of consistency to this commission in Treme would be on the discussion block. Change Treme, free the city and its people from the shackles of living under Treme, the slave murderer. Johann Baptiste. The public honors of Moon Landreau need to be removed from New Orleans. The Landreau family history reveals slave ownership, ancestral ties to the Confederacy, and the shameful cover-up of the Landreau's African ancestry, the ultimate act of white supremacy. Moon's great-great-grandfather owned 5 slaves. The white slave owner had a child with one of his black slaves. Moon's grandfather, Victor Landreau, listed the family as Black as recently as the 1900 census. Then, on the 1910 census, the Landreaus designated themselves as white. When Victor Landreau's wife, Cerinthia Mackey Landreau, passed away in 1946, the booklet at her funeral stated, "From a daughter of slavery to matriarch of an important New Orleans family." And this family, for more than a century, concealed their past as if ashamed of their Black ancestry. The Moonwalk needs to be renamed and Moon Landreau plaque needs to be removed. They owned slaves, had improper relations with at least one slave, and Moon's great-great-uncle fought for the Confederate States of America. I thought the point of this commission was to erase white supremacy from New Orleans. The Landreau's undeniable stance that they preferred to be recognized as white over Black can no longer be ignored. Tyrone Smith. Is Judge Ivan Lamel Black? I am told he does not consider himself to be Black. I do not know him personally. I do see where places say he is Black. He does not look Black. I do believe if a person has that light skin that they have other Black genes, they can then be said to be mulatto. Can this commotion clear up the air? If we plan to change a name, I do hope it is for a Black man or woman. Willie Ganusa. Has the Streets Renaming Commission considered naming a street for Mayor Moon Landreau? He was the first African-American elected mayor of New Orleans. That's the last comment.
Thank you very much. And while I'm going to fight my human nature to address some of the things that were said that were absolutely false and or hyperbole, and just simply state that I would suggest that all of you go back and look at the previous meetings. We have addressed multiple times the things that you all are calling errors, and also dismissed the notion that people outside of New Orleans were in control of this report. Also, to the person who commented about Judge Ivan Lamel, Ivan Lamel is African-American, has never tried to say that he was anything other than African-American. He's a graduate of Xavier University and a member of many African-American related groups. So let's not worry about that as much, because we did not primarily consider race in our decisions about the names on these streets. So that let's not even get engaged in that part of the conversation. with regard to the additions of Conrad and Locke, not only did we give public notice of that, we announced it at one meeting and then waited 2 meetings before we actually voted on it. This is the second meeting since we announced those changes where we'll actually finally take action on making a suggestion. So simply because you were not aware of it and didn't look at the public notices and the means that we have to get the information out to the public doesn't mean that we haven't done it. So I would ask that people refrain from hyperbole in that respect as well, and actually look at the process and how it has gone about and judge it based on its merits, not on your beliefs. With that, commissioners, unless you have any other questions on this section, we will move on to agenda item number 6, where the final report recommendations, where we'll fully discuss some of these recommendations as you see fit. So let's take a look now at those. And how would you all like to proceed? Would you like me to go back through each street, or would you all just like to bring up the streets that you would like to take some action on? Which would probably be more, I'll just go down the list and you all stop me if you want to take action on the changes. We'll start with Beauregard Avenue. Again, our initial recommendation is that it be renamed Sherwood Woody Gagliano. The reconsideration options were Wisner Boulevard and James E. Jimmy Fitzmaurice. Do any of you have anything that you would like to ask or comment on that particular request, or a motion to, well, not a motion yet because we need to do the comments before we vote, but a suggestion about what to do with it, and then we can vote on it after we hear the comments. If there is no action that you all would like to take on the recommendations, we will move on. Conrad Street. The suggestion is that it be Jasper or Jimmy Fitzmaurice. Do any of you have a comment about Conrad Street?
Yeah, I would like the commission to take into consideration one of the names associated with Mount Carmel. I think it's important that that be considered, given the amount of feedback that I got with respect to feeling in the neighborhood that there should be some recognition of the contributions of the sisters and the church and the school and everything they've done in that neighborhood for so many years.
Okay, any other comments?
Oh, could you, or Carl, could you remind us which of the names associated with Mount Carmel might be an option there?
Yeah, Paul, would you mind?
Yeah, the 3 that I've noted that by far outstripped any others were either Carmel by itself, Mount MT period Carmel, or the sister who apparently is, I don't know what the right terminology is, but I'm going to use the term founder of their presence in Lakeview and maybe founder of the movement in South Louisiana. Her name is Julie Therese, and it's the last name spelled Chevrel. I think it's pronounced Chevrel, but I apologize if that's incorrect. So those are the 3 associated with Mount Carmel that are on the front burner at least from my contact with the neighbors, the residents.
Thank you. Commissioners, any other commissioners have a comment? Wait, I'm going to say something, but I'll wait for you all to finish. All right, hearing no others, I just want to remind you all that when we had our initial vote on these streets, those 4 streets, Conrad, well, it was Walker and then Locke and the other 2, we voted first on a thematic theme for those, which was basically the self-emancipated slave theme, because those individuals that we listed relocated to Lakeview prior to there being a Lakeview. So just want you to consider that as you think about the options that have been produced that would remove that theme, basically. So that being said, does anyone else have a comment or a motion they would like to make not a motion, but or a suggestion, and then we'll take a motion on it when we get past the public comments. So is there a suggestion on a particular name outside of the Jasper for Conrad Street?
My suggestion is Mount Carmel.
Thank you, Paul.
From me, that would come in the form of a motion, right? That's not.
So not just yet. Well, actually, not just yet, because we can't vote until we do the public comments.
Right, okay.
So hold on to that, and at the appropriate time, you can.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I just want to make sure we don't violate the rules of the commission. But that's what you just did is exactly what I would like to have happen. If there's a suggestion for it, I'd like to hear them so that we know what's going to be put forward when we get to the motion period. We'll move on to Locke Street, and the choices are Melanie Diefendahl, Michael Mizell Nelson, Charles McKenna, James E. Jimmy Fitzmaurice. If you all want to add others, you can do so now. And of course, Sue and Thomas, if you want to comment on these while we go through them, feel free to do so as well. So commissioners, do you have any discussion that you'd like to have on Locke Street?
Well, I would like to, just hear an update from Sue and Thomas, just with a little more information. If they don't mind.
Okay, and specifically, you'd like more information on the persons who have been named?
Right.
By them? Yep, okay. Sue or Thomas, would you please?
I can give you, or Thomas can give you, since I'm sure he has access to the notes and I don't at the moment, more information on the 3 names that we suggested.
Yes.
And I cannot give you more information on the new names that were added through public comment or today.
Mm-hmm.
I also, this seems like a moment to remind the commission that the recommendations of the commission will go to council, at which point there will be further public comment.
Right.
Council will make recommendations to the City Planning Commission, from which I will recuse myself, and there will be further public comment. So the extent to which the addition of names, at the extent to which the valid comments about the website being updated are factors in people making informed decisions, is also something that the longer and larger process has more space to accommodate.
Yes.
I'm going to hand off to Thomas for details on the 3.
While we wait for Thomas to join us, I'll just give you all a quick, some information about James Jimmy Fitzmaurice in case you don't know. Mr. Fitzmaurice was a former elected official from New Orleans, was the lieutenant governor of the state of Louisiana at one point, lived in the Lakeview area for many years. So, that is the gist of why his name was put forth based on his public service to the area. Thomas, are you there?
So Carl and Sue, just for clarification, so is Conrad and Locke part of the 4 that we were holding as the emancipated slaves?
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to just connect, not.
Locke is not.
Locke is not, but Conrad.
That's right, Locke is not. Locke is adjacent, but not one of those streets.
Okay, good. Thank
Yes,
you.
Conrad and Locke were identified through the process of following up on the Lakeview Civic Improvement Association's report and pulling apart Lakeview streets, for which, again, I thank them for giving me the opportunity to wormhole into every map ever produced. That was lovely for me. Thomas had to step away. Bobby, can I please provide you with additional information after this meeting? I don't have the capacity to pull up
It's
my
not a
notes.
problem. Not a problem at all. Thank you, Sue.
And I'll try to pull my notes up as we go through the others so you can get those two, because I think Ms. Diefendahl was associated with UNO. And I'm not sure about Mizell Nelson, so we need them to come with that. And Charles McKenna, I know that I have something as well I can pull up there.
I'm sorry, I think Sue was pointing out I had to step away. Was the question about Ms. Diefendahl, Mr. Mizell, Dr. Mizell Nelson, and Charles McKenna?
Yes, we can get some additional, some reminder of the history for the three of them as well.
I don't have it right in front of me, but I can, off the top of my head. Melanie Diefendahl was a longtime faculty member at Delgado, in fact, which is close to that street. She was instrumental in starting a variety of programs there, including, if I'm not correct, if I'm remembering this right, the Irma Thomas Center, I think, for advancement.
Right.
And then Dr. Mizell Nelson, who tragically passed away about a half decade ago at a very young age, really kind of pioneered the most, basically the oral history program at the University of New Orleans after having taught at Delgado. And I mean, so much of the research we've drawn on here really kind of is inspired by Dr. Mizell Nelson, and who was very active in communities across the city, being able to tell their own stories. And finally, Charles McKenna was active in, again, I don't have my notes right in front of me, but he was active in the early part of the 19th century. He was an Irish immigrant and who tragically died of yellow fever, I think, during the kind of era of canal building, but he was active in a variety of attempts amongst the city's artisans to kind of create better working conditions. And so, I mean, the kind of three connections there, both Ms. Diefendahl and Dr. Mizell Nelson taught at Delgado right next door for years. And then, of course, Charles McKenna, who was, well, he didn't work on the canal himself, right, was part of that era of, in particular, Irish immigrants, so many of whom perished in the digging of the canal.
Thank you, Thomas.
Yes, thank you very much, Thomas. Does anyone else have a question about Locke Street? Or does anyone have a suggestion for which name we may recommend? We'll vote on it at the end, of course, after the comments.
My suggestion is that we use Charles McKenna.
Okay. All right, thank you. Please file that with your motions for the end for me, please.
Yep, will do.
Thank you. So we'll move on to Robert E. Lee Boulevard. The current suggestion, as I said before, is Allen Toussaint Boulevard. The reconsiderations were Toussaint Boulevard in District D and Hibernia in District A. Hibernia all the way was another suggestion I received today, actually. Pete Fountain, Giuseppe Garibaldi, John Quincy Adams, which would be a reversion to a previous name of the street, as would Hibernia for that matter. Andrew Higgins, Mount Carmel, James E. Jimmy Fitzmaurice, Chief Willie McCrossan. I'll just tell you all with Andrew Higgins, the comments that were made with that suggestion were his involvement with creating the boats for World War II that actually turned the tide of World War II have a connection to that particular part of town and UNO, I think, that area. And so that was part of the reason that his name came up for that street. Does anyone have any questions or comments about Robert E. Lee?
I have a comment that maybe, or a question maybe for Kim and Thomas. Are there any streets, parks, or places in Lakeview that honor anybody Black, African American currently?
Can you ask the question again, Mark?
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, but I missed it, that's all.
I was just asking if there are any streets, parks, or places in Lakeview that honor any African Americans currently. To Sue and Thomas specifically.
If you know.
If you guys know. Sue? I
think
think they're hiding from me.
Yeah, we lost both of them. Well, while we're waiting for them to come back, Paul, do you have any additional comments about those streets based on your conversations with the neighborhood association?
On what, Robert E. Lee?
Oh, Robert E. Lee, yeah.
No, I think you've covered all of it. Most of the comments really was more of a discussion about whether or not it's appropriate to divide street names between districts. And I think we touched on that. Mark may have said, we talked about that at the last meeting.
Yes.
And so just from a procedural standpoint, is that something that can be done or should be done? But in terms of names, all the names that have been listed and you listed are basically the ones that I've heard.
Yeah, and just as a reminder to the commissioners and then to the public as well, it is preferred by the City Planning Commission not to split streets.
Yeah.
From a commission perspective, we discussed in the last meeting that the perception of splitting the street might inadvertently cause one to think that we are trying to create two New Orleans and further adding to any division of folks in the city by race, and we are certainly not inclined to do that outside of just the general purpose of trying to adhere, as we said from the beginning of this, as closely as possible to CPC recommendations or preferences, so that when the process, if it goes from the council to CPC, there's not very many things that they have to do that are outside of their rules. And I think we've done a good job so far of staying within their playing field.
Right.
Does anyone have a suggestion about whether they would like to make a change from Allen Toussaint, which is the current suggestion? Okay, hearing none, I will move on. Governor Nichols, current suggestion is Lolis Edward Eli. The reconsiderations are Hospital Street, which is a reversion to an old name, Oscar Dunn, split it between Bayou Road and Hospital Street, Bayou Road all the way, Father Jerome Ledoux, Lucille Levy Hutton, Cosimo Matassa, Salvatore Calatano, Captain Salvatore Pizzati, Philip Mazzei, and Dr. Louis Charles Rudney. This is a quick overview, and I'd like, if Thomas were back, defer to one of them to give better descriptions. But the Oscar Dunn, we discussed greatly at the last meeting a bit, is an unsung hero of the Reconstruction era and a politician here in Louisiana who should be of a lot more great renown than he currently is. But there's also a suggestion further down that he be named, Washington Artillery Park be named after him as well. The split, we just discussed the preference to not split. Jerome Ledoux was a priest at St. Augustine Church in Tremé, of great renown and well beloved by that community. Lucille Levy Hutton was a suggestion given to us by a professor at Dillard. Cosimo Matassa was in the record. He owned a label and produced some of the greatest artists that came out of the city. As the person who sent that in suggested, revolutionize the music industry with his label. Dr. Rudney, of course, we discussed previously, and its ties to the he was a Renaissance man. So he, of course, is one that we discussed previously. Are Sue or Thomas back to give a little more light to some of these?
I'm here, yeah. If you have any specific questions, Sue had to step out, but she should also be back in a second. Okay.
Can you provide a little more background on the Bayou Road and Hospital Street options?
I'll start there anyway. You mean in terms of the split?
No, not the split. Well, you can speak to that as well, even though we just discussed it while you were out. about CPC not preferring that we do the split, do splits rather, but more about the history of Bayou Road and Hospital Street with Governor Nichols.
So Hospital Street obviously was the original platted name of the street, going back to refer, of course, to the Ursuline, the hospital established by the Ursuline nuns. In terms of Bayou Road, I mean, I'm not a planning commission. I'm not a planner. Even if you I will also say, if you extended Bayou Road, and again, in the complete hypothetical, all the way down to the river, you would still have a section of Governor Nichols, right, that remains. So even if you did that, and I think Sue has a better sense of the kind of the planning and the kind of platting issues about extending the Bayou Road after where it's somewhat diagonal, right, and it comes off of Governor Nichols. So that's the history there of Hospital Street. I am not as familiar on the kind of longer term history of Bayou Road and when it took that, but I have some conjecture. Sue.
I would say that one of the concerns from both a planning and public safety sense on the extension of Bayou Road would be that it would create 10 blocks in which there are 2 Bayou Roads with redundant addresses on them, which from a 911 standpoint is an actual nightmare and carries with it like considerable risk of harm to the individuals who live on either of those roads.
Going back to Hospital Street, I'll also point out, right, that and this is not an advocation one way or the other, but it is a reminder, right, that streets are renamed frequently, right, and that some of this process in fact involves naming streets that were renamed for people at particular historical moments for particular historical reasons in relationship to the establishment and consolidation of things like Jim Crow, and that in particular with that renaming of that street is there. So, which is not a brief for or against Hospital Street, but it is a broader reminder, right, that in relationship to some perhaps comments about so-called erasing history.
Okay, thank you. And just as a little bit further information on Ms. Levy Hutton, she was an activist, teacher, pioneer, and the architect of the music education curriculum of the Orleans Parish African-American schools. She also spearheaded some music festivals that were of great renown between 1948 and 1962. She is affiliated with some of the city's most well-known artists, including Ellis Marsalis. She was a very accomplished person of her own right, having attended Straight University here in New Orleans, which is now Dillard. Graduated from Mills College, Oberlin Conservatory of Music, University of California, Berkeley, Columbia University, Northwestern Universities, and did a thesis while at Northwestern of an evaluation of the music training of Negro teachers of the New Orleans public elementary schools with recommendations for improvement. Her lasting impact is why she was recommended. Does anyone have any questions about Governor Nichols or suggestions to make a change from its current recommendation?
I would, this is Commissioner Hamilton. I'd just like to reiterate my support and the support of those in the surrounding neighborhood for Lolis Eli Sr.
Lolis Edward Eli. I think we should have corrected that previously. He's not a senior, and Lolis Eric Eli, his son, is not a junior. So it's Lolis Edward Eli is the person that we're talking about. Yeah. Just to make sure that it's clear for the record. Any other comments on Governor Nichols? We'll move on to Penn Street. It's currently recommended that it be Dr. Sarah Mayo. Recommendation to reconsider for Marcelle Noer was made. Thomas, would you mind giving a reminder to the group of the poll for Marcelle Noer?
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. For those who don't remember from the report, La Marseillaise Noire was a poem published by a pseudonymous man named Camille Naudin, and it was a poem published in direct reaction to the Mechanics Institute riot which occurred in July of 1866, of which 46 pro-democracy supporters were massacred by a mob of Confederates, including William Bradford Penn, I might add, who was there, who later went on, of course, to be the political leader of the insurrection at Liberty Place in 1874 in an attempt to overthrow the democratically elected government of the state of Louisiana by force. That poem is a remarkable poem. Again, really, if you put it into Google, it's Marseillaise Noire. It's written in the kind of meter and style of the French national anthem, La Marseillaise, and it is a really moving call for Black and white to come together to defend the values of democracy and freedom in relationship to those who would treasonously try to destroy them. And again, given the location of that street, that is why we put it there, so close to the Mechanics Institute, which is now which is where the current Roosevelt Hotel is today. So again, just a couple blocks away from there. Yeah, that's La Marseillaise Noire. And again, you can find the poem and its translations online very quickly. There's an excellent translation done by Centenary University in Shreveport, and the person who wrote that particular narrative, I also point out Dr. Robert Azzarello, who is a professor of English at Southern University of New Orleans and an expert on New Orleans literature.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. And as I mentioned when we did the initial report, that poem really does encompass basically what this commission is trying to do, bring people together in a fair and equitable way after a period of some bad activities. So, I appreciate that was brought back to the council. But could you also just briefly give a quick update, an reminder of Dr. Sarah Mayo's accomplishments? Was born in a hospital that was named after her. So I have a little bit of a bias.
Sorry, I'll pull it up here really quick here. So I can just kind of reference the narrative. So I don't have it off the top of my hand. Sorry, and
it's okay.
Edition of Zoom. Got a dog barking in the background too here. For those of you guys have the report up there, it's on page 91. Dr. Sarah Mayo was born in 1869. She was one of the first female physicians in the city of New Orleans. She was a humanitarian reformer who was active in providing public health services to especially poor children of the city. She was denied entrance to attain her medical degree in Louisiana, so had to leave after being born. I think she was born in Catahoula Parish. And she had to leave for Pennsylvania before she returned in the early 20th century. And during the course of her practice too, I mean, she was also really forward at a time when medical practice and medicine in the South was incredibly segregated. Excuse me here. Got the dogs of Zoom in the background. At a time when the practice of medicine was incredibly segregated, that she took patients races, ethnicity, things like that. And again, she was instrumental and really is kind of one of the first and most prominent women physicians in both Louisiana and New Orleans, and again, provided a lot of services that were not being provided at the healthcare level in the state and city then.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, do you have any questions about Penn Street? Does anyone have a suggestion about whether we should make a switch or stand pat?
It's a tough call. They're both
Well,
so incredible.
We can think about it until we move to after the comments. So just put it in your mind if you want to think about it going forward.
Okay.
We'll move on to Captiville. Currently suggested that it be named after Judge Ivan Lamel, U.S. District Judge Ivan Lamel, who was the first Black magistrate judge in federal court here in the Eastern District of Louisiana, and only the third Black district judge. The suggestion was made that we could reconsider Roudinet and Ortiq. Does anyone have any questions about Captiville or suggestions? Does anybody need a reminder of Roudinet or Ortiq's background? I know we all have the information and have studied it for a while. Hearing none, we'll move on. Tulane Avenue, current suggestion is Tutti Montana. Choice, reconsideration options, Oscar Dunn, Captain Salvatore Pizzati. Does anyone, well, Thomas first, can you give a reminder of Oscar Dunn's accomplishments as well as Tutti Montana's, and I'll find the Salvatore Pizzati information.
So Oscar Dunn, who was a lieutenant governor in the state of Louisiana, that's the top of my head. I cannot remember the exact years, but it would have been late 1860s and early 1870s, making him the first African American to serve in that office in the entire country, I think. Is that correct? Again, he was probably one of the leading pro-democracy political leaders in Louisiana in that time, 1860s and 1870s. He was also instrumental as well in defending the U.S. in the context of the War of 1861 to 1865. I'm sorry, in relationship to Allison Tutti Montana, he is often referred to as the Chief of Chiefs. He was a Mardi Gras Indian who was very active and very important too, and also kind of in transitioning Mardi Gras Indian culture and practice towards a more cooperative endeavor, right? That and away from rivalries, and really kind of active in emphasizing, right, the power of the suit, the power of the artistry as well. And he, of course, tragically passed away at City Hall, right back roughly 15 years ago, right after Katrina, while testifying in relationship to harassment of Mardi Gras Indians and Mardi Gras Indian culture.
Thank you very much. Captain Salvatore Pizzati, according to the information that was suggested with his name, was the first to bring bananas into the United States. He was a Commodore of the Oteri Pizzati Steamship Company, which was sold to United Fruit Company in 1899. Childless, he donated over $150,000 to orphans, education, and city park. In Buras, Louisiana, he cultivated 14,000 orange trees. Does anyone have any questions or comments about the Tulane Avenue choices? Hearing none, we'll move on to Sem Street. Veronica Hill is the current suggestion. The reconsideration options were Edwin Williams and the Algiers 7. Thomas, would you mind reminding the people who Edwin Williams was and the circumstances around his death with the sailors?
Sure, I think I might pass this one off to Sue too, but if not,
I will take it. Whoops. Edwin Williams was on his way to Zion Baptist Church in Algiers in April of 1943 when he was approached by 2 white sailors who were stationed at the nearby naval base. The sailors attacked and threatened him. He shouted back, and he was attacked by a 19-year-old second-class seaman, Walter Sherwood, who stabbed Williams with a broken beer bottle, beating him so badly that his face was unrecognizable and inflicting fatal wounds. This would be to previous comments, a street named in recognition of a lynching victim, which to my knowledge is one of only a handful in the country so named.
Thank you. And I know it wasn't on your original list, but do either of you have any information about the Algiers 7? If not, I can give a quick brief. Basically, the Algiers 7 was a group of activists on the Algiers portion of Louisiana and the Fisher Project particularly, who were brutalized by police in the 1980s, I think 1980 exactly. Just because I wanted to read the rest, my phone died. I apologize, guys. But from a there was a story recently on the news about the activity around them and the Black Panther activities at the time as well. But that was a suggestion that was thrown into the consideration bunch with no additional information added to it. Actually, Andrew, would you happen to have any information on the Alger 7? However brief.
Not off the top of my head, I don't know.
Okay, no, that's fine. Thank you. Okay, does anyone have any questions or commentary about Sam Street? Recommended change. Hearing none, I'll move on to Slidell Street. Henry James Red Allen is the current suggestion. Same choices, Edwin Williams and Algier 7 were suggested there to be reconsidered as well. Any comments on that? Hearing none, we'll move to General Taylor. Current suggestion, Professor Longhair. What we were asked to do is reconsider it based on the belief that it was named after Zachary Taylor and not his son, Richard Taylor. Thomas, would you all like to make some comments about that?
Do you want to hop in? I mean, I can say something really quickly. I'll start and see if you want to kind of continue on here. So we've taken that under advisement. We'll be looking at that for the next meeting. I will point out though as well, right, there's a long history and a long known history of thinking about the street in relationship to the Confederate general's son. That history is, for instance, recognized by probably the most prominent institution on General Taylor Street, Juror Hospital, which has a full kind of recognition of that. And so to some degree, you know, and again, I do want to go back and spend some time with those maps and try to get at some of those planning documents to really get a sense here. But again, the kind of the wide knowledge across the city, to my knowledge, again, reflected in places as prominent as Truro, suggesting, and in fact, suggesting that they are even uncomfortable being on a street named after that person over time has been, you know, as well noted and as well eminently findable in, if you want to do a little research on that. So that's where we're at with that. We won't have a final report on that street for a while, but again, the kind of long tradition for decades is to understand that street is named after a person.
After Richard, not Zachary, correct. And Richard inherited 100 slaves. So this, you know, may fit our ordinance under several categories, not just the Confederate general space. Sue, did you want to add something?
I just wanted to reaffirm that we are looking into this. It is the process by which we are drawing on both the Historic New Orleans Collection and the New Orleans Public Library's staff time in order to pull maps that may or may not be digitized is part of the process at each time a street is challenged, because we do want to find the earliest use and disambiguate wherever we can. That's a slow process involving a lot of folks and a lot of documents.
I'll also add right now as well that pretty much, I mean, Historic New Orleans Collection is recently reopened for researchers, one person at a time, with usually about 2-week backlog in terms of appointments. New Orleans Public Library has been generous enough to allow folks as part of this process and is in fact closed to such researchers, right? And so also given pandemic considerations, it's not the normal time. And other places in the city, places like Tulane, for instance, are completely closed to such researchers.
And I'll just remind the public at this point as well that we have another meeting scheduled after this one in a few weeks. So at that meeting, if we find information that makes a difference in how we vote today, we will certainly reconsider it at that point. It should be a very limited number of things that we would need to reconsider at that point anyway. So we do have a stopgap of another meeting prior to having to turn in the report. All right. I'll take the next two together. General Ogden and Fortier Streets were asked to be taken off the list, but it is clear, and Thomas and Sue, you all can add in where you'd like, but both those individuals fit the Confederacy portion of the ordinance. So they're, really any suggestions to take them off the list would be, of the fact that they actually fit the criteria. Do any of you have any comments or questions about either of those two streets? Particularly Commissioner Sturko, because I know you've had many conversations with the neighborhood association members about that.
Right, and you just, well, Carl, you just described the situation. The neighborhood association and the leadership has taken the position that they wanted both of those streets removed, but per our charge from the city council, and it's clear and unambiguous that both of these streets fall within the streets that are appropriate for renaming. There's been no suggestions about different names or criticism of the names that we have recommended in the past. So beyond that, there's really not anything for us to discuss, I don't think.
Okay. Thank you. Any other commissioners have questions or comments about it? Hearing none, we'll move on to Palmer Avenue. So current suggestion is Edith Stern. The reconsideration request is for Earl Palmer Avenue to be the choice. Just as a reminder, excuse me, that this conversation also wraps into Palmer Park, which is a little bit down on the list as well. It's currently suggested to be renamed John Minor Wisdom Park, and Earl Palmer was suggested for that park as well, excuse me, as Dr. John Park. So we will still discuss them separately, but just to know that they're related, so listen closely for both. So Palmer Avenue, do you, Sue or Thomas, want to remind folks about Edith Stern and her contributions?
Sue?
Sure. Edith Rosenwald Stern was born in 1895. She moved to New Orleans in 1921 after her second marriage. Known for her philanthropy in many areas, including education and civil rights, as well as her devotion to the arts, particularly her commitment to young classical musicians. She was a civic leader and part of the Women's Broom Brigade, which was a group of New Orleans society women who aimed to sweep away corrupt governance, and was a strong advocate for higher education for African Americans. She founded the Newcomb School for preschoolers outside of Tulane University, as well as organizing funding for Metairie Park Country Day School.
Okay, thank you. Earl Palmer is a world-renowned drummer from New Orleans. I'll ask Commissioner Sturko if he wants to give a little bit more information about Mr. Palmer, since he's been heavily involved in those conversations.
Sure. We received, and hopefully everyone has received, a letter dated January 27, signed by 3 Palmer Avenue residents, Julie Chapman, Catherine Favreau, and Ann Milling, requesting that the commission consider renaming the street after Earl Palmer. Attached to that letter is a letter to Councilman Geruso from the district, signed by Shelley Palmer on behalf of the Palmer family, asking us to rename the street after their father. He clearly was an incredible musician, one of the great musicians to come out of New Orleans. From what I've read and seen, he was the most recorded drummer in the history of American music, inductee in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2000. He was born and raised in Tremé, started as a tap dancer on Bourbon Street, went to the vaudeville circuit, Then he started playing at jazz funerals, second line parades in his neighborhood. He enlisted and fought in Europe in World War II. He used his Army pension to educate himself. He earned a degree in music from Grunwald School on Magazine Street. And then he went on to collaborate with Dave Bartholomew, Fats Domino, Little Richard, Smiley Lewis, Professor Longhair, Dr. John Allen Toussaint, and recorded in Cosimo Matassa's recording studios. And I think, I may be wrong about this, but in terms of his actual music, he's most famous for creating what's called the backbeat, the standard backbeat. I've learned a lot about this lately. That basically was the drum beat that formed the basis of rock and roll music in America. He later moved to LA because he was allowed to do more out there, to be more creative, and wasn't constrained so much like Black musicians were as a result of Jim Crow up until '64. And he stayed in Los Angeles until his death in '08. His family has strongly, obviously, recommended that we reconsider the name that we have recommended and rename the street after Earl Palmer. I had originally, and hopefully all of you have this material on Earl Palmer and the letter from some of the leadership that lives on Palmer Avenue, and attached to both of those are about, I think I counted them right, around 100 signatures from, I think, the 1700 block all the way through the 3000 block of Palmer Avenue of folks supporting the Earl Palmer name. They've also proposed to install a plaque on the corner of St. Charles and Palmer Avenue that will formally rededicate Palmer and educate tourists and residents about Earl Palmer's life and the challenges he faced being an African-American musician in New Orleans. I had originally moved that it be named Earl Palmer, and that motion was defeated. I think there's concern about using the same name and by doing so not accomplishing our task. I am going to, based on all of this activity and the work of these neighbors and the contact with the Palmer family, when it's the appropriate time in our meeting today, I'll move that we reconsider and consider again naming the street Earl Palmer after the New Orleans musician.
Thank you. And Commissioner Serco, did Mr. Palmer have any connection to the street?
To the actual street itself?
Yes.
I don't have any information that he did. I don't have any information at all on that, Carl, one way or the other.
Okay. All right. I was just checking.
Yeah.
Can I ask the question? Because I know
Yes.
you addressed this earlier, Carl. You know, there is Palmer Park. Is there, I mean, if Palmer Park were to be named Earl Palmer Park, I mean, I just wonder if that might be something, you know, that the community would appreciate. And to bring up one of the things that we discussed, and that was the fact that, you know, most of the streets in New Orleans are named after white men. Very few are named after African Americans. Very few are named, even fewer, I believe, are named after women. And you know, in keeping with a goal to, you know, try to address that with some other significant streets across the city, you know, that was why we chose Edith Stern in the first place for Palmer Avenue. So to me, they kind of go together. But I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. They do go a bit together, which is why I'm going to ask Sue if she would quickly remind everyone, particularly the public, about Dr. John, just very briefly. And we can kind of wrap that discussion of the park and the street together.
Dr. John Malcolm John Rebenak Jr. was born at Baptist Hospital on Napoleon Avenue in 1941. Spent 77 years of his life representing New Orleans to the world as a musician. Was a session musician at Matassa's J&M recording studio in the French Quarter as a teenager, and on world tour by the 1970s. He was a tireless advocate for the city after Hurricane Katrina, was nominated for 15 Grammy Awards over the course of his career, and inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2011.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from commissioners about either Palmer Avenue or Palmer Park? Or concerns, or we've already had a suggestion from Commissioner Sturpko. The one other thing I would remind the group of is that, you know, as I have previously, we don't want to inadvertently provide cover, basically, that doesn't eradicate the overall purpose of this, which is to remove the legacy of the existing name of the person who's associated with the street and or park. So we need to think about that as we decide whether or not we will make a change, particularly back to Earl Palmer. No slight to him, he clearly was greatly accomplished and deserving. Same with Edith Stern in my regard, based on the work that she did as well. But you know, we need to, because it's going to come up again on Patton Street as well. You know, we want to be mindful not to inadvertently do something that sends the wrong message as well. So if there are no other comments on Palmer Avenue or Palmer Park, I'll move on to Patton Street. Current suggestion is Nils R. Douglas. It has been suggested that we reconsider naming it General George Patton. The correspondence that we all received that mentioned that basically said that assumed the person who made the suggestion assumed from his anecdotal accounts of people on the street that most people already thought that it was named after George Patton. And so why not just let the misconception be the truth, was basically the statement. You know, I will quickly just reiterate to the group again, we need to be careful not to inadvertently do something that thwarts the whole purpose of this mission. And you know, the deservingness of the person who shares the same surname is not something that we take lightly or put aside, because obviously these folks have merit of their own, but we need to also consider the overall impact of that. Paul, do you have any additional information on Patton?
No, I don't. In fact, the George Patton suggestion really started in earnest in the last 72 hours. Yeah. You know, I just started getting one email after the next. So I'm assuming that folks directly affected by the Patton Street name and the suggested change had gotten together and started talking about this. But other than getting the emails that hopefully I got that forwarded to everybody so everybody could see what I was getting, there's really been nothing had happened until very recently. Mm-hmm. It was really sort of a quiet, one of our more quiet streets in play.
Right.
And so I'm really in the same position as everybody else is on this one.
Okay. And I will state this as well, because it goes along with the conversation about the possible motives and or consequential changes not based on the motive of bad motives. But one of the comments I received in requesting that it remain Patton after George Patton basically said that, you know, the impact of adding a little known civil rights person name to the street, you know, would be equally as unimpactful as the Patton that street is already named after that nobody realized, right? The danger to that statement to me is that it reinforces the thought that happened when these streets were named in the first place, that certain people were not worthy because of who they were, or the way they looked, their ethnicity, or what they did of being recognized in the city. that statement to me was overtly saying that there was no real value to Mr. Douglas's civil rights background. And it clearly is a statement made out of just sheer ignorance of what Mr. Douglas did, right? And I don't mean ignorant in a pejorative way. I mean in the way that it really is meant to be. The person just doesn't know and wasn't aware of Mr. Douglas's history as a civil rights lawyer and activity and helping to integrate schools, including LSU and others down here, in conjunction with others like Mr. Eli and Jack Greenberg from Columbia University. So, one of the main purpose of doing this was to be patriotic and, remove the names of Confederates from the streets. We have mentioned before that there has been the welcomed equitable outcomes of this, which is to include more people of color and more women in the names of streets in the city of New Orleans, which currently, even if we add all the people that we have on this list, we'd still be less than 1% of the streets in the city. So that are named after people who aren't white males, right? So that equitable outcome, I think, should be remembered, even though it wasn't the main objective. Does anyone have any suggestions about Patton or other comments? Hearing none, we'll move to Lee Circle. Current suggestion, Leah Chase Circle. The options again were a concept allowing multiple honorees. One was to make it Tivoli Circle, and that was based on the comments by the Italian American Federation that its legal name is already Tivoli Circle, to which we previously had a conversation that what we are looking at is the plot of land where the Robert E. Lee Monument was, not necessarily the street itself in this renaming process. So it is more akin to a park or a place than a street rename, so that we think it fits under our ability to take a look at the name. Also, Bulbancha Way, as you heard in the comments previously, spoke about not just a people, but a way of life and looking at the indigenous folks who were here prior to most of us and our ancestors. World War II Circle, Veterans Circle, obviously because of the association with the World War II Museum down the street. Andrew Jackson Higgins Circle, because his street that is named after him is currently adjacent to the circle. Unity Circle, Blaine Kern Circle, Mardi Gras Circle, obviously both Blaine Kern and Mardi Gras Circle, an obvious tip of the hat to their contributions to Mardi Gras and the fact that the main parade route goes around Lee Circle. Harmony Circle, which would provide an opportunity to speak of many iconic New Orleanians rather, as opposed to just one, be it music, civil rights, or anything else that matches with the theme of harmony. And Dorothy Mae Taylor, which was a previous suggestion as well. As you all know, Ms. Taylor was the lead person in the ordinance that integrated Mardi Gras cruise and changed the face of Mardi Gras as we know it. Fats Domino, and we'd had this conversation previously, that Fats Domino is also being considered for Catherine Avenue, which is a street where he lived. That is a separate activity outside of this commission's. Fleur De Lis Circle was another suggestion by the public, which basically was a nod to the city in general and its heritage, as opposed to an individual. Ulysses Grant Circle, the person who submitted that basically said it's a logical change to Robert E. Lee, since Ulysses Grant was the architect of the victory for the Union Army. Does anyone have any comments or questions about Lee Circle? Or any suggested changes?
Yeah, I like to make a change.
Who's speaking? Is that yourself?
Commissioner Jackson.
Mr. Jackson, thank you.
I'm sorry. I like to nominate the Dr. May. Motion for Dr. May Taylor.
So we'll do the motions after we hear the comments, but that will be a motion you will make to go back to Dorothy Mae Taylor, or to reconsider Dorothy Mae Taylor. Correct?
Yep, thank you.
Correct. Okay. Does anyone else have a comment or suggestion about Lee Circle?
I do have a comment. So I've spoken with Councilwoman Palmer. I believe the city council wants to take up a position and begin to explore renaming Orleans Avenue after Leah Chase. And Andrew, I think you had a statement about that as well, right?
Yeah, just that this is with sort of, yeah, sorry, with respect to the, with respect to the geographic relation between Orleans and Miss Chase's restaurant. That is something that council members have absolutely discussed. Obviously, Orleans doesn't necessarily fall within the stated preference of the commission at this time to focus on Confederate and Confederate adjacent individuals. And so there is a conversation about putting it through the proper sort of process again, led by the council. And it might be a more appropriate place to honor Miss Chase due to the geographic proximity to Dookie Chase's.
So, and also having those conversations surrounding Lee Circle, one of the recommendations that I've heard was that we remove the pedestal, or we recommend the removal of the pedestal to do something like a harmony circle where we can honor Dorothy Mae Taylor, musicians, and programmatically make it about more than just one person. So I think that is a recommendation that we should consider moving forward with.
Thank you for that. And again, after we hear the public comments, if you all want to place those in the forms of motions, we'll entertain it at that point. Any other comments about Lee Circle? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to Washington, Palmer Park. We didn't specifically discuss it. The choices, the current recommendation is Judge John Minor Wisdom Park. The suggestions were Earl Palmer Park and Dr. John Park. Does anyone have any comment about that or suggestion? Hearing none, I'll just reiterate that Commissioner Hill stated earlier that we should consider the possibility of Earl Palmer Park being a compromise with the neighborhood and keep Edith Stern as Palmer Avenue, just to remind everyone of that. I know that Commissioner Sturko, you've had at least one conversation with the Minor Wisdom family. He's certainly deserving of the honor should it be bestowed on him by the City Council and Planning Commission. Do you have any commentary about that, or just?
No, I mean, I'll echo what you said. I received a very nice note from the family, from Judge Wisdom's family, and the feedback that I received from that area of town surrounding the park was just about 100% in favor of naming the park after Judge Wisdom.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any other comments, commissioners? Hearing none, we'll move to Washington Artillery Park. We had no formal suggestion previously. We've been asked to consider Oscar Dunn and or the 2nd Louisiana Native Guard. Those were suggestions that came from the panel of experts, but I think and Sue, please correct me if I'm stating this wrong, but are really moving to just Oscar Dunn alone on that suggestion?
We are moving to Oscar Dunn as the recommendation of the panel. Yes.
Can you just quickly say why that is an appropriate spot for Oscar Dunn? If you can.
Right. There have been several proposals for various streets that sought a specific location, thank you, and level of recognition for the first Black Lieutenant Governor potential gubernatorial candidate and potential vice president. It is an appropriate location. It is central to the city and would be an appropriate way to honor his legacy.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions or comments about Washington Artillery Park? We'll entertain a suggestion in the next, after we hear the comments. So with that, we'll move on to the comments. How many do we have in this section, Andrew?
I believe it's 100 and, I think it was around 135 last time I checked. Let me just do a double check.
So even with that number, what I would suggest, commissioners, is that we limit the reading to 30 minutes and receive the rest. Most of them we've seen similar comments already. So I think that we're well versed at what most of what's going to be read anyway. Unless you also, I'm sorry,
166 comments.
66, yes. So unless the commission has an objection, I would say that we limit the reading to 30 minutes. Hearing no objection, let's move forward with the reading of the comments.
So we will be reading these in the order that they have been received, and commissioners, I will be sending an email that'll have all 204 public comments that we've received on all topics at the end of this meeting.
And Andrew, just really quickly, for the public, and particularly those who submitted the comments, again, we've got another meeting after this one. So if after reading all the comments, the commissioners come back with a recommendation for something different based on that reading, we will entertain that at the next meeting. Thank you.
First comment is,
Andrew, can you tell me again, what's the number of comments?
it's 166 on this agenda item. It's 204 public comments altogether.
204. Okay, great. Thank you.
And Andrew, I'll cover the comments on this one.
Okay, thank you.
Unless if you had an overriding desire to do it.
No, my face has had enough today. Thank you.
Okay, all right. First comment is from Isabel Sherman. I strongly support the renaming recommendations. There's no reason why in this day and age we should be honoring Confederate leaders or soldiers or anyone who oppressed the ancestors of our fellow citizens. As a born and raised New Orleanian and 13th generation Louisianan whose ancestors were slave owners and fought for the Confederacy, I strongly support the fair re-envisioning of how our city looks and treats inequities and horrors of the past. We are living in a new time, and our landmarks, streets, etc. should reflect our new reality and the more equitable one that we should all be trying to move towards. As a member, the next one is from Aaron Fruman. As a member of the current and future industry that builds them, and someone whose work promotes the training and development of the future leaders in that industry, I believe that renaming buildings, streets, and creating landmarks in tribute to those we admire today is a positive step towards seeing the best of ourselves reflected in the world around us. Thank you for the work that has gone into this effort so far and for all that remains on the road ahead. David Newman. As stated in my public comment from December's meeting, I fully support the work of this committee and believe strongly that any streets currently honoring Confederate traitors, white supremacists, and Jim Crow enthusiasts, as outlined in the report, should be renamed. The proposals by the committee for names that honor promoters of civil rights and New Orleans culture bearers are especially welcome. Hans Bernick. I'm so proud when our city takes the lead in this country, and especially the South, renaming streets after former racists and slaveholders. This has a real impact on people's perception of what we, New Orleans citizens, represent and what we can do with our lives. Robert Saxon. Tearing down statues and renaming streets, we are moving away from a republic form of government to a socialist form, which will turn into a communist form of government. Statues and street names can be used as a learning tool to educate persons about what happened in our past and to take great care that it does not happen again. By removing statues and renaming streets, we are moving down a dangerous path, and quite frankly, history will repeat itself. If we continue, then there will be more wars because our lives will end on this earth and there will be no remembrance of past history. This is about our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. History in all of its ugliness will repeat itself if we continue down this path. Sunny Summers. I am 100% in support of renaming streets to be more representative of the future we are trying to create, leaving behind the names that represent a past we are trying to move on from. Please eradicate the oppression that comes with continuing to honor folks who do not represent the cultural inclusivity we are moving towards. Ashley Abbott. I am okay with a name change, but why do we have to make the street name another person? Why cannot we just name the streets, objects, or animals or such, like Acorn Street, Dolphin Way, or Picnic Avenue? Why must we insert a person who could be criticized from one side or the other? It only adds to the divide. Who could be mad at their street named Acorn Street? Emily Newstrom. I believe in renaming streets. New Orleans has the opportunity to take actions that fight against historic government and systemic racism. We believe that renaming buildings, streets, and creating landmarks in tribute to those we admire today is a positive step towards seeing the best of ourselves reflected in the world around us. Rory Payne. I urge the commissioners to accept the renaming recommendations. The names that will be changed are of people who do not represent the values of this great city. And it was a damn shame that Alan Tucson had to live on a street named after Robert E. Lee. Please accept these changes and do not listen to the predominantly white neighborhoods, more conservative than the city as a whole, who disagree with some of the recommendations. Do this because the vast majority of the city is tired of living on the street names of racist bigots and traitors. Laurie Jackson. I am a native of New Orleans, reside in Jefferson, but travel the streets of the city to restaurants and businesses. I would like to call your attention that Penn Street was not named after Davidson Penn, but is named after Alexander Gordon Penn, a postmaster who served prior to the Civil War. Likewise, Leonidas is not named after Leonidas Pope, but named after King Leonidas. I understand a group of students from Australia did the research so can understand a lack of clarity in their findings. Furthermore, I understand the purpose of this commission is to right the mistreatment of various immigrant groups. By changing the name of Tivoli Circle, you are adding insult to injury to the large American Italian community of New Orleans. Anne Long. Lest we forget or remove the past, history may repeat itself. I feel a careful accounting of names and full history is needed. An association with a group that was not upholding all races is understandably concerning. However, times were different and we are charting history. Let's chart it in a better way for all. Recognize that all of us as individuals can be good and bad. Some of the proposed changes are associated with individuals who do significant things for community and our city, even though their mindset on race at the time was not where we are today. In reflection, it certainly was oppressive to some races. We are making progress. Do not erase the past. If thorough research and public commit by all groups leans to a change, I wonder how much more we will learn in the next 50 to 100 years about being empathetic and accepting of all. Will research uncover concerning attributes of some of the proposed individuals? Should we use non-individual names instead, i.e. pecan, elm, cypress, dogwood, green, red, blue, yellow? Also, has this commission or the council fully assessed the economic impact this will have on the city for street renaming and local residents and businesses who it will affect? Blair Washington. I oppose the renaming of street names. There's a lot of false information the city council is presenting of our history. We should be like France, which is very progressive and refuse to alter our history with street name changes, removing statues, and the name of political correctness. Amanda Rose. I support. Dr. Anne Trepanier. I don't mind changing street names, but not the ones that were original with the founding of the city. Please, please, please research the names before changing them. A lot are historic and have nothing to do with the Civil War. My family founded this city, and it's important to retain the integrity of the city's history. Thank you for your consideration. John Kerry. I strongly favor the renaming of New Orleans streets to honor contemporary heroes and not Civil War era segregationists. This is a positive step forward for our city and community. Tony Randall. I support. Jerome Estevez. If streets have to be renamed, I feel they should be generic and not designated to one individual person. For example, Robert E. Lee Boulevard could be Shoreline Boulevard, in respect to the original shoreline of Lake Pontchartrain. Has anyone done research on the financial and geographic impact this will cost? Jessica Wilson. I support changing of any street name that was originally named in honor of slavery, slave owners, Confederate veterans, supporters of white supremacy, or romanticized notions of the antebellum South. I sincerely appreciate the work of the commission and the council. James Morgan. As a lifelong resident of Louisiana, I have vested interest in the history and culture of our state, including New Orleans. I am totally opposed to renaming of the streets of New Orleans done solely for the purpose of erasing our history, good and bad. We can only learn from our mistakes by addressing the need to do better in the future. Erasing the names of historical figures from our streets does not address any real issue that divides us. It will only cause more tension and controversy without solving any real social issues. Please vote no on the name changes. Alexander Fournette. As a direct descendant of Mouton, let me be the first to say, screw that dude. He sold his own people out to rich landowners from other states when he ran the vigilante committees and was a traitor to this great nation. He can kick rocks. Get him off every sign and pedestal in this state. Kevin Griffin Clark. I support renaming streets. Caroline Center. I support suggestion to rename Sophie B. Wright Street for Catherine Kitt Center, my mother. In addition to the scholar's notes, I want to add that my mother graduated from Sophie B. Wright Public High School and grew up on Coliseum Square, not far from Sophie B. Wright. Elliot Brett. I think that renaming streets that have ties to racism is important, and like many of the names of modern heroes I've heard. I like many of the names of the modern heroes I've heard. I'm not sure if anyone has suggested Steve Gleason as a street name, but that dude has been a symbol of determination, resilience, love, and pride for everyone in New Orleans. Patrick Armstrong. Good afternoon, commissioners. I am a worker, homeowner, and property taxpayer in New Orleans. I've followed this public process since it began, and I've already submitted a number of public comments in full support of renaming New Orleans streets to better reflect history, community, and diversity of the city they traverse. The researchers have done a fantastic job. The commissioners have done due diligence to promote public engagement, and the reasoning is compelling. I hope you will vote to move forward with these recommendations. The other day, a friend of mine made clear why the new names are so important. He is one of the folks worried that changing street names would somehow be erasing history, and offered that he had never heard of some of the people whose names would be used moving forward. Well, that's the whole point of this process, isn't it? So much of New Orleans history was already erased to elevate Confederates and celebrate white supremacy. The entire renaming process is to correct some of those historic wrongs and to share the names of New Orleans' real history for all to see. I hope you will move the recommendations forward. It is time. Hunter McFadden. Renaming will cause ill will and further divide our citizens. If renaming must take place, then let us salute those who gave their lives in service to this country, and those who have made meaningful contributions in the sciences and humanities, perhaps those who have been afflicted by out-of-control street crime in this city, starting with those murdered, as a memorial and a reminder of the real problems facing this city. Julia Lang. I strongly support renaming streets in New Orleans that were named after people who support white supremacy culture. Marianne Oquent. Gentlemen, as I understand it, the scope of the Street Renaming Commission is to remedy the historical mistreatment of local immigrant groups. My grandparents on my mother's side, the Iguagiatos, and my father, a Messina, immigrated to this country and the city of New Orleans from Italy many years ago. For a long time, Italian Americans were treated as second-class citizens. In spite of that, New Orleans has had many immigrants from Italy and has a strong Italian American community. At one time, Tivoli Circle, which was later called Robert E. Lee Circle, was meant to honor our Italian ancestors. Taking away the name of Tivoli Circle would only add to the mistreatment of my ancestors by further insulting the Italian American community. Nora Ellertson. As I raise my child in the great city of New Orleans, I hope he can point with pride to streets like Norman Francis Parkway and our own Henriette Dillil Street, learning from the examples of people who believed in the worth, dignity, and rights of every member of our community. It's time to retire street names once placed there for those who fought to continue human enslavement and torture. Let's show the world the very best of New Orleans by renaming our streets for champions of creativity, justice, and love. Andrew McDaniel. Rename Robert E. Lee, Leah Chase Boulevard. Rename Lee Circle to Toussaint Circle. Let's honor those who we all feel proud of in the city, not divisive figures in history who have little or nothing to do with our city and culture. Mike Larkin. I understand renaming streets honoring Lee or Davis. They were Confederate leaders and have to be expunged. But renaming Leonidas Street illustrates just how silly this entire process has become. The only people who could possibly be offended by the name Leonidas would be a few thousand Persians who have been dead for more than 2 millennia. If you're going to change every street in New Orleans with a Greek Spartan name, there won't be any reference points left in the city. Robert Wyman. Erasing historic, cultural, or iconic street names is hurtful, not inclusive. It solves nothing and seems to be the same act as that which it attempts to remedy. I disapprove of and am disappointed in these clearly spiteful actions. Amelia Byrd. I would like to put in my vote for a street named in honor of Leah Chase. Michael Malucci. There's a difference between historical recordation and reverence. History is not being erased by renaming streets. Societies choose to raise up certain figures for reverence. Those figures should be representative of all members of those societies, or at least figures who have contributed positively. Holding up in reverence figures who are enslaved, disenfranchised, or degraded others is simply wrong. Neil Johnston. Regarding the proposed naming of Patton Street, while I agree with the overall direction and intent of renaming certain streets, it seems to me that the list has gone too far in selecting Patton Street for a name change. Some names, like Robert E. Lee, are well known to the general public as what they are known for. If you polled people in the city of New Orleans and asked them what they felt Patton Street was named for, I suspect that outside of a few scholars, the relationship of that name to white supremacy or other sad aspects of our past and current society would not be known or guessed by anyone. Perhaps I can understand the pain that the well-known names bring people, but I doubt that the name Patton brings pain to the vast majority of citizens in New Orleans. I suggest that the spirit of what the Street Renaming Commission can be realized by sticking with the more well-known names. With today's cash-strapped city government, I suggest the cost outweighs the benefit of renaming Patton Street, and I request that it be removed from the final report. J.W.G. Jr. I am adamantly against the renaming of Robert E. Lee Boulevard and all proposed renaming of streets in the city of New Orleans. Robert E. Lee was more than a Confederate general in the American Civil War, and to define his entire character by this singular painful event in our nation's history is short-sighted, unfair, and does nothing to change the past, while creating a distinct and palpable division among the few whom seek the name change, and the majority of who do not want history erased. Lee finished second in his class at West Point, where he would later serve as superintendent, and then after the war, he became president of Washington College in Lexington, now known as Washington and Lee University. He was an accomplished soldier while serving in the U.S. Army and is accredited for freeing slaves after the Civil War. Robert E. Lee was a complicated, thoughtful, and intelligent man, and much more than just a Confederate general, and removing his name does nothing to repair the injury of history, but only serves to sow more division. Accordingly, one of the main driving forces to removing monuments and renaming streets is Malcolm Suber, Southern University adjunct professor and leader of the radical Take 'em Down NOLA and the People's Assembly New Orleans groups, and a self-professed Marxist-Leninist, as reported by the New York Times. Mr. Suber is entitled to his opinion, but I believe it is relevant and necessary for this body to know, and all the people witnessing these proceedings to know, and clearly understand just who is driving these divisive actions like renaming streets and removing monuments. For any observer remotely familiar with history knows the ideology of Karl Marx as the foundation of communism, expanded upon and developed by Lenin and exploited by Stalin. It is the ideology of communism which is driving the movement to erase history, led by people like Malcolm Suber. It is also the ideology of communism to divide people by race, class, sexual orientation, for the explicit sole purpose of sowing discord and chaos, to foment hatred of one group for another. It's also the tactics of ISIS, the terrorist organization, which rolled through the Middle East, destroying museums, statues, and any reference to a nation's historical past. Sadly, these tactics have worked here. The nation and the city of New Orleans is not united. I ask, where is the poll which shows the majority of New Orleanians support the renaming?
All that 2 minutes.
Next comment is from Denali Lander. I strongly support the Renaming Commission's initiatives for the street renaming project as a critical step toward overshadowing racism in the city. Linda Usden. I am proud that our city is addressing the harm caused for so many years by insensitive names, glorifying people who contributed to slavery and racism over many years. I am fully in support of following the suggestions and the thoughtful work of the Renaming Commission. William Mason. The entire issue of renaming streets should not be a priority in our city's government. City leadership should spend their time, money, and resources on real issues like fixing a worsening crime problem, street and drainage infrastructure, struggling businesses due to COVID shutdowns, and bringing new businesses to New Orleans to improve the local economy. Michael Barry. This is a primary reason why there is no progress on real civic issues. Our leaders are frozen looking in the rearview mirror. Valuable time is spent judging people for a long period that you do not know, with knowledge of that person's partial history. We are too immature a society to have any individual person's names on anything. What difference does it make what the street name is when no one can drive on them due to the horrible conditions? Divide and conquer is good politics, but it is caustic to a community. Sharonda Williams. I wholeheartedly support renaming Capiteville to Judge Ivan Lamel. Wayne Connor. I support the renaming of public streets and or other public places in honor of the following individuals: Lolis Edward Eli, Nils Douglas, Ivan Lamel, John Jack Nelson. Each one of these men contributed immensely to the legal landscape of our community and our nation. The impact made by their advocacy and mentorship is nearly immeasurable. Linda Perry. I do not support the renaming of streets. History is history, whether one agrees with it or not. Myra Menville. I disapprove of the street names being renamed. It needs a public vote, not a handful of people. You can't change history, only learn from it. Kate Precher. To nominalize the struggles of the past by simplifying those struggles to a single, currently politically correct view does disservice to the citizens of our city. The Civil War was fought on issues of unjust taxation and the issue of states' rights. Justification for the war by the North was stating it was a war against slavery. Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation freed only the slaves in the South, not the North. Slavery was wrong and immoral, but the North was waging a war of economic aggression against the South. Slavery was only the banner under which they fought. This people of our city are intelligent enough to understand history if it is honestly presented. To obliterate the complexities of the past will destine one to repeat it. Rachel Howe. We should absolutely rename any street, schools, or any publicly supported, funded, or maintained item that are currently named for people that supported segregation, slavery, or more recently, policies that perpetuated inequalities in New Orleans. Thank you. Karen Geiger. I urge you to support the recommendations of the Renaming Committee. This broad-based group of people have worked hard to represent all of us, and their thoughtful ideas should be presented for the council votes. It is vital that our community reflects our history in all its fullness, and these street renaming are part of that. Ezra Dunlap. I am here to speak on the subject of renaming Sophie B. Wright Place. One of the recommendations is my late grandmother, Kit Center, and I think she deserves the honor. Ever since I was little, she taught me about sustainability, showing me where and how to compost. I grew up listening to stories of her taking the white and black signs from the streetcar and hiding them under her coat, and driving kids to school as anti-integration protesters threw objects at her car. I remember watching a film of her in court defending housing for black students. When the Wall Street movement was in motion, she and my mother took me to the protests and educated me about what was going on. She was somebody who inspired anyone who met her to do better in and for this world. I hope you ruminate on my comment and choose to rename Sophie B. Wright Place after her. Misha Logan. I am in favor of removing street names that represent the racist and negative historical figures and replacing them with names of prominent figures such as Lolis Edward Eli, Niles Douglas, Ivan Lamel, and John Jack Nelson. Andrea Baker. The renaming of New Orleans streets is a grave mistake. There are literally thousands of Louisiana residents who visit the city often. Renaming streets will create confusion on the part of people who need to get around the city to enjoy the many restaurants and places of interest. There is no good reason to confuse frequent tourists to the city who have loved and enjoyed for many years. Please think of all the inconvenience he will cause residents who will have to change their addresses and to tourists who pay much of the tax revenue that helps run New Orleans. Bridget Falcon Villa, renaming Sophie B. Wright Kit Place. Thomas Fierick, don't change Robert E. Lee Boulevard. To him, it was about states' rights, not slavery. He resigned his commission and took armed for Virginia. He did not commit treason, nor did he or his troops commit war crimes. Don't change it to show the commission and council is not complete ignoring history. Most of these changes don't make sense. It took serious research to determine who they were named after. If the public doesn't know, who can be upset? And inconsistent with my defense of Robert E. Lee, if change are made, use the new person's last name only. Otherwise, GPS searches are difficult. Nolan Street are tricky enough with 3 names attached to some. Thank you. H. Avery, this is a huge mistake. James Kepler III, I respectfully request that we be very careful in the extensive renaming of streets to ensure that the outcome is positive for New Orleans. The breadth and character of the changes currently being considered not only, 1, initiate significant expense and inconvenience for businesses, residents, delivery services, official records, civil services, etc., but also 2, risk further divisive feelings among our people. I believe that it is of utmost importance that any new names are well justified and accepted, particularly by those who live on the individual street or in its neighborhood. I'm concerned for our city and its rich culture and traditions that attract not only so many visitors, but also those of us who choose to live here. According to the CCSRC website, names suggested for removal are those that honor white supremacists. In that vein, I respectfully submit that, among others, we should not change Robert E. Lee Boulevard, but rather consider his lifetime of service before and after the Civil War for perspective of his role in that conflict. We are poised to deny him any sense of honor, any sense of duty or honor to his country, and to unjustly label him solely as a white supremacist. The work of the commission can truly and positively seize opportunities to discover and teach valuable lessons from our past. A Wikipedia comprehensive overview of Robert E. Lee's life includes U.S. Military Academy, 32-year U.S. Army service, loyalty to his home state of Virginia, even though not supportive of secession, and his efforts to advance reconciliation after the war. He became a national icon of reconciliation between North and South and supported education of the freed Southern blacks. Robert E. Lee is not the icon of slavery as currently cast. We can teach lessons of character and reconciliation instead. Thank you. Ned Plakus, I respectfully disagree strongly with the renaming of these streets. While understanding how some symbols and names can be offensive to some people, the erasure of the city's history will not help alleviate any pain or educate any people. Many of these names are not even related to the Civil War. Carrie Slayton, historical factual accuracy is most important. The committee is not basing their decision on accurate information. Shame on you. Our community is being splintered by your actions with intention of pitting blacks versus white. Please leave well enough alone. Your recommendations are reprehensible. Debbie Satoon, the renaming of major streets has been based on the premise that all Confederate officers and even civilian donors who created public school to educate black children were evil slave owners. This rewrite of history is creating more racial tension and denies future generations the chance to learn from history. The assumption that a street needs to be renamed one for one, black for white, disregards others who contributed to our rich history. Native Americans, Irish laborers, Isleños, etc. We should broaden our perspective with more imagination given to consider popular New Orleans tradition. How about Mardi Gras crews names or famous dishes or local flora and fauna? Let's try harder. Amy Harris, I respectfully beseech you not to rename these New Orleans streets. Better to fix potholes than to finance this misguided project. The headaches and heartaches to the residents and to those trying to navigate the streets will be incalculable for many years to come. N. Baker, crime reduction and fixing potholes are where taxpayer dollars should be spent. Changing street signs is a gross misuse of taxpayer monies. Kenneth Schwartz, I strongly support the recommendations from the final report. Sally Seaman, I strongly oppose the plans to rename so many New Orleans streets and what seems to be the plan to rename Lee Circle. The city is currently facing severe financial deficits, which have led to numerous personnel cuts. We are experiencing incredibly high crime rates, and many infrastructure problems have gone unaddressed, especially many potholes, which have made driving in our city dangerous and a disgrace. Funds which are available should be spent on these pressing problems, not on making and installing new street signs, creating new maps and letterheads and stationery, etc. As for the renaming of Lee Circle, I feel that it should be renamed Tivoli Circle as it was originally. This recognition of its origins seems to find favor with many citizens. All other proposed names have evoked dissension in some, it seems. While I did not have the pleasure of knowing Miss Leah Chase personally, I've heard from those who did that she disliked controversy. Thus, it can be reasoned that being the center of controversy surrounding naming the circle after her would be upsetting to her and not something she would be in favor of. Annette Adams. The street renaming is an acknowledgement of work done for the good of all people. Let us not fall into the trap again that the Confederacy and its heirs will right a wrong. Let us simply move on recognizing a healing. A street being renamed in honor of Niles R. Douglas represents his passion for justice, but more importantly, New Orleans' acknowledgement for good. John Cranfield. I am not opposed to the renaming of streets. However, I would recommend not honoring any individuals. I'm sure this project will cost the city quite a bit. We would not be facing this situation now or anything like it in the future if our streets were renamed after everyday objects, trees, birds, etc. Karen Kern. Kit Center for Sophie B. Wright Place. Jean Bowling. To whom it may concern. As a 30-year resident of Palmer Avenue, I respectfully request the rededication of Palmer Avenue to honor Earl Palmer. Mr. Earl Palmer was a New Orleans native and a remarkable musician, reflecting the culture so many New Orleanians enjoy and are proud of. I cannot think of a better way to honor this man who has largely gone unknown to New Orleans. He is the city's son. Please find it in your hearts to honor this man now. Now is the time and the place. The Honorable Marie Bookman. I am recommending that we honor the late New Orleans attorney and civil rights activist Niles Douglas by naming a major street after him. Max Nasser.
And that is 30 minutes.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you, Andrew. Excuse me. I'd like to, and I know I said this last week too, we don't want to go blow for public comment, so I won't do that. But what I will say is generally these things. First off, our list of recommendations is more inclusive and diverse than the current status quo of our street names. So I, as well as I'm sure most of the commissioners, take offense to the accusation that all the streets are being swapped off one for one with African Americans and white males, which is exactly is not true at all. And even if it were true, again, we'd still be talking about less than 1% of all the streets in the city of New Orleans that fully, tell or try to fully tell the story of everyone who's lived here. Also, I think this every time I hear this statement about, not renaming things because you'll repeat history. If I label a hot stove that it has a cool surface, but it really isn't cool, that's going to solidify history that repeats itself over and over if people get burned. And it will be that way until I change the sign. So let's stop looking at this as someone trying to erase or eradicate history. There are places in this city that are worthy of having conversations juxtaposed against the current status quo, and then there are places that don't warrant that, right? But let's be clear, this is not this commission's job or intent to in any way have some retribution added to what it is doing. This is strictly a matter of, excuse me, taking away names of Confederate soldiers and people who supported their cause, their lost cause. And there are equitable outcomes of that have come about based on the learned work that we have done from all the studies from both the public library and our panel of experts, as well as input from citizens. So let's stop with the false narratives that we are trying to erase history. The other thing, there is no true healing until there's a recognition of the harm, which is one of the things that I hear people say all the time that, oh, nobody's going to heal, you're going to create more division. Well, we're just going to exacerbate the existing conditions if we don't recognize that some of the things that have been done, particularly in labeling these streets post-Reconstruction, were done for harm's sake. So let's stop with that false narrative. The narrative about renaming things after inanimate objects so that we don't come back and do this again. Doing that would only mask the issues that underlie these names in the first place. 10 horrible people should not eradicate the want to celebrate 1,000 good people. So we're not going to play into that narrative from this commission standpoint either. So, where there are places that will be named something outside of an individual, such as the conversation about Lee Circle, where we talked about concepts, that's one thing. If it serves a greater good of unifying the city in a way that is meaningful because of location, or place, or topic, right? But in general, there is no need to not honor people who have lived honorable lives and done things to further everyone's well-being, as opposed to further lost causes and/or harm others specifically. With that being said, I'm going to ask the commissioners if you all have any comments about the public comments as well. If so, please feel free to interject them here.
Yeah, Carl, thanks. I've got a couple of things to say, because I tell you, each time we listen to these comments from the shade tree historians and the neo-Confederates, and we're quiet about it, we're doing nobody a service by listening to those things, allow those things to be said without countering a couple of those points. And now, like you said, I don't want to go blow for blow, but there are some common themes and some common misconceptions among some of us about who some of these people were. But one thing I want to point out, the one gentleman who was a descendant of Mouton, good on him. What is his descendant and what he did, or his ancestor, what his ancestor did, what does that have to do with him today? And why do so many people feel like we have to back up the misdeeds of our ancestors? There are a lot of us. I mean, if you're white and you're from the South, guess what? You got about 25% chance of being a descendant of Confederates. And you can find that in a few books. Tony Horwitz's Confederates in the Attic would be a great place to start. And speaking of some books, there are some books out there. I mean, I think not many people apparently in this day and age read them. But, I mentioned Ty Sedgley last week. There are no credible historians. And I got this from him because I thought surely there must be one somewhere. But he once, back in 2015 told me, I think I had a speech in front of the city council when I said few credible historians dispute the central issue of the Civil War was slavery. There are none. There are zero. And he says it again in his current book. But he corrected me on that. So, all of these shade tree historians who say, it wasn't about slavery, it most certainly was about slavery. So I don't think we can continue to let that go by without addressing that. A couple of other points here, this, and I'm going to address these two supposed heroes of the South with some facts. There's some folks who threw out a couple of facts about Robert E. Lee, but they left out some too. And everybody likes to say that he had no choice. He had to defend Virginia. That's not true. He most certainly had a choice. When secession happened, there were 8 colonels in the U.S. Army from Virginia, Lee being one of them. There were 8 colonels in the U.S. Army from Virginia, Lee being one of them. Only one went with the Confederacy, and that was Lee. So this crap about he was defending his homeland and he had no choice and he was not supportive of secession is just, I'll use Sedgley's word. It's a lie. That is not true. And the other thing, we were talking a lot about Beauregard earlier. And Carl, you mentioned some kind words about Beauregard last time, our last meeting. But there's some other pieces of Beauregard I think people need to hear. And Beauregard did do some good things. But I'll tell you what else Beauregard did. Everybody knows what the Emancipation Proclamation was, right? So if you read James McPherson in the Battle Cry of Freedom, which is
He froze on us. Okay, while we wait for Richard's screen to unfreeze, are there any other comments from commissioners? Or did I freeze? Can you all hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. So when he comes back, we'll let him finish. Do any other commissioners have any other statements? All right, hearing none. We'll vote on any recommendations. I'm sorry. Having discussed the suggestions received from our expert panel, neighborhood associations, general public, and elected officials since we submitted our initial report, I open the floor to motions to make modifications to our initial list of streets, parks, and public spaces, name change recommendations to the city council. So if anyone has any motions to make, now is the time.
Paul, you're on mute.
Paul, you talking? You're on mute.
Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
Why don't I've got a few, if Carl, obviously up to you, maybe I should just run through the District A motions that I'll make as District A representative, and then we go from there. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Conrad Street, I move that the commission recommend that Conrad Street be renamed to Mount Carmel Street.
It's been moved. Is there a second? Is there a second? Motion dies for lack of a second.
All right. Okay. The next one is Luke, Louque Street. I move that the commission recommend that we recommend the new name for Luke Street, since we don't have one, to Charles Mckenna.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and properly second that Luke Street be renamed, or the recommendation for Luke Street be Charles McKenna.
Commissioner O'Connor, real quick, was that Commissioner Jackson who seconded?
Yes, Commissioner Jackson second.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you.
Be named Charles McKenna. Any discussion?
To the extent it's necessary, I want to explain, I think it's very important that we recognize the contribution and the suffering of the Irish immigrants in Lakeview, going back to the building of the new Basin Canal. Thousands and thousands of them died from disease, and they were treated less than human. And I think by recognizing Charles McKenna, given everything I've read and the bio that we received from the experts, I think that goes. It's something. It's important, and it's something that we as a commission in this overall effort to right these wrongs that we do, and that's the reason for my moving to recommend Charles McKenna.
Thank you very much. Any? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion to recommend that Luke Street be renamed Charles McKenna, say aye. Should we do roll call, Andrew?
It'll be easier if we do roll call, just so we make sure we get the votes right. And as a reminder, if we could say yes rather than yay, so if people are voting in favor. Commissioner Connor?
Yes.
Commissioner Raymond?
Yes.
Commissioner Hill?
Yes.
Commissioner Sturpko,
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
Commissioner Westmoreland, have you joined us again? Great. I believe Commissioner Hamilton had to leave for a board meeting, so I think that is five yes, 0 no's, and the motion carries.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Paul, do you have others?
Let's see. I think the only one. Yeah, I have one more. Based on the efforts, the good faith efforts, frankly, extraordinary efforts of the residents affected by the Palmer Avenue street change and the sentiments expressed in writing and to me personally by the family of Earl Palmer that they would like to see the street named after him. I am moving that the commission reconsider its initial recommendation of Edith Stern and recommend to the city council that Palmer Avenue be renamed and rededicated per the letter we received in honor of Earl Palmer.
Is there a second? Is there a second? Motion dies for lack of a second. You're going to do Palmer Park as well?
Yeah, well, I'm recommending we keep Palmer Park named for John Minor Wisdom. So I have no motion.
Okay, so no motion on that one. Does anyone else have a motion on Palmer Park? Hearing none, we will move on.
I think that's it for me.
Okay. Yep, I think you're right on District A. Oh, Patton Street.
I have no recommendation that Patton, I have no motion on Patton Street. Niles Douglas is somebody in fact, I think I nominated Niles Douglas the first go around, and I think it's appropriate.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioners, do you have any other suggestions? I'll go down the list to make it easier on us. Beauregard Avenue, does anyone have a motion regarding Beauregard? Hearing none, we'll move on. Actually, on Conrad Street, I think we need to do an actual motion on Jasper. We postponed doing that previously.
Oh, I think you're right, actually.
So is there a motion?
Jasper was the recommendation. Oh, that is right. I move to rename Conrad Street to Jasper Street.
Is there a second?
I second.
It's been moved and properly seconded that Conrad Street recommendation be that it be changed to Jasper. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Well, roll call vote, sorry. Andrew.
Commissioner Connor,
Yes.
Commissioner Raymond,
Yes.
Commissioner Hill,
Yes.
Commissioner Sturpko,
No.
and Commissioner Jackson.
Yes.
That's 4-1. Can we move on to the next one? I want to check something in our bylaws about whether or not we need to get to 5 for yes votes.
Okay,
Let me check
thank
it
you.
real quick. Yep.
All right, we'll move on to Robert E. Lee Boulevard. Does anyone have a motion for Robert E. Lee Boulevard?
This motion, Carl, this motion would be to withdraw Allen Tucson and replace it with another one?
With one of the other options or some other option that wasn't listed?
Gotcha. Okay.
Any motion regarding Robert E. Lee? Hearing none, we'll move on to Governor Nichols. Current suggestion, Lois Edward Eli. Any suggestions on Governor Nichols? Any suggestions on Governor Nichols? Hearing none, we'll move on to Penn Street. Currently, Dr. Sarah Mayo is the recommendation. Excuse me. Is there any recommendation to Penn Street? Hearing none, we'll move to Capdeville. Currently, Judge Ivan Lamel. Is there any recommendation to Capdeville? Any recommendation on Capterville? Hearing none, we'll move to Tulane Avenue, currently 2D Montana. Any recommendation on Tulane Avenue? Is there any recommendation on Tulane Avenue? Hearing none, we'll move to Sem Street, currently Veronica Hill. Is there any recommendation to Sem Street? Any recommendation on Sem Street? Hearing none, we'll move to Slidell, currently Henry James Red Allen is the suggestion. Any recommendation on Slidell Street? Any recommendation on Slidell? Hearing none, we'll move to General Taylor. Professor Longhair is the current suggestion. Is there any recommendation on General Taylor? Any recommendation on General Taylor? Hearing none, we will move to General Ogden, currently Herman Midlow Street. Well, I'm sorry, General Ogden and Forshey, because they fit the ordinance, there's no reason to go to them unless someone wants to make a motion to change, to take them off the list, which you can do, but they do fit under the ordinance. So hearing none, we'll move on.
I'm sorry. The only feedback we got on those was take them off the list, which was inconsistent.
Correct.
With the research, right?
Correct. Thank you very much. Palmer, I'm sorry, we did Palmer, Patton. Lee Circle, currently Leah Chase Circle. Is there any recommendation regarding Lee Circle?
I would like to recommend,
Recommend.
based off of the understanding that the council will move forward with the process for renaming Orleans Avenue to Leah Chase Avenue, independent of this process, that we rename.
Okay.
Sorry.
Tell them we're busy. That's okay. Go ahead.
That we rename Lee Circle Harmony Circle. Hold on. That we rename Lee Circle Harmony Circle so that we can honor multiple people, such as Dorothy May Taylor, musicians and civil rights leaders alike, giving us an opportunity to do something more robust and profound in that space. And I would like to also recommend that to the council that we remove the pedestal in the area and think about something that's more unifying.
Is there a second?
I second.
It's got to be.
Been moved and properly second that we change our recommendation for Lee Circle to Harmony Circle. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please do the vote. Andrew, call for the vote.
Commissioner Raymond,
Aye. Yes.
Commissioner Hill,
Yes.
Commissioner Connor,
Yes.
Commissioner Sturpko,
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson.
Yes.
And that's 5-0. That motion carries. Just for the commissioner's knowledge, you do need to get to 5. There needs to be a unanimous vote on all of these. It has to be a majority of the commission. It can't just be a majority of the members present. So any motion that does not get a unanimous vote will fail.
Okay, so did we have one that fits that?
Yeah, that one was 5-0. So that's a recommendation then to move, change Lee Circle to Harmony Circle.
No, but previously I thought we had a 4-1, which prompted you
We had
to.
a 4-1 that was on Conrad to Jasper.
Yeah.
Okay. So we can't take action on that one.
Yep.
All right. Further action required. That's why we have another meeting, so that's good. Okay. We've done Lee Circle.
Carl, I'd like to make a motion to name Washington Artillery Park Oscar Dunn Park.
Is there a second? Is there a second? Paul, are you raising your hand?
I'm second. I second.
Okay, it was been moved and properly seconded that Washington Artillery Park be recommended to be renamed Oscar Dunn Park. Any discussion?
I just want to say that I feel that park is a prominent enough space to honor Oscar Dunn. And I think it would be a good recommendation by this commission.
Okay. Any other discussion? Any further discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Commissioner Raymond,
Yes.
Commissioner Hill,
Yes.
Commissioner Connor,
Yes.
Commissioner Sturpko,
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson.
Yes.
All right, 5-0, the motion carries.
Thank you very much. All right. That completes our, do the commissioners have any other streets that we haven't yet discussed that what they would like to make subject to a motion? All right, hearing none, we'll move on. Recognizing that this commission's charge was not to consider changes to all streets, parks, and public spaces, we know there are some which would benefit from further consideration by the council and have discussed that previously. A short list of those that was suggested by the public included Jackson Square, Milne Playground, Poydras Street, Caffin Avenue, and Washington Park. Some of these spaces and streets require consideration for change or contextualization. Jackson Square represents the complexity of these considerations. Are we better served as a city if we remove Jackson or tell the more full story of his deeds in context? He gallantly led the militia who defeated British soldiers at the Battle of New Orleans, but he also misled and or lied to promising freedom to entice slaves to fight alongside of him at the Battle of New Orleans. He then told them to return to their plantations at the end of the battle, of the successful battle. Free people of color also fought with him only to return from their victory still having limited rights. These facts about our future U.S. president demonstrate our dilemma before adding modern day concerns of the annual brand value to our city's tourism income stream by Jackson Square being called Jackson Square. I strongly suggest to this commission that we recommend to our city leaders that they look at these and other places and spaces, clearly defining that no matter when they occurred, atrocities like genocide and slavery don't get to stay hidden because of nostalgia, convenience, or apathy. So while it would literally be, in lawyer terms, Paul's dicta rather, in the report, I would like leverage to make mention that there are some spaces we weren't allowed to look at that possibly should be looked at, and encourage the council to do that. That's based on all the comments that we received over the course of this last 6 months, that there are clearly some spaces that need to be looked at some point for their appropriateness and or contextualization. My further discussion on that for me is that if at some point, there are there's an ability to add walking tours or have people dial into the map and get some contextualization of the street or park or place where they are in New Orleans, that, we're able to, as a city, be able to use that medium to show people that, where appropriate, like Jackson Square, that while we may still have reasons to leave Andrew Jackson there, he is better served there with us telling the stories of those free people of color or those slaves that came, which there's documented evidence of some slaves who did come here to fight with him, one of which was mentioned in our recommendations from the experts earlier that didn't make it, but he was mentioned. Having those types of things around him in the four corners of that park so that people can, again, learn and not just accept that because this person is in a place of prominence, excuse me, he must have been all great, right? So it doesn't require a vote, but I'd just like a general sense of encouragement from you all or not about whether or not I have a little leeway to add some of that into the report. So if anyone objects, please speak now.
I support that, Carl.
I support that as well.
Okay. And of course, you'll all get the report, so you'll be able to read it all before it goes. If you have some changes you want to make to it after that, you're more than welcome, obviously, to make those suggestions. This is a group effort, not a dictatorship. So with that said, if we're finished with the final report, we'll move on to item 7 on the agenda, stakeholder engagements. We've continued our outreach. The Spears Group, of course, has continued to publicize the meetings via social media, arranged for appearances for us to get the word out to the public, as well as help maintain the website and get us in the places and spaces where more people know about what's going on here. We heard some commentary tonight about the website. We will definitely make sure that it is looked at and updated. While our process of getting the report in is coming to a close soon, our work is still, there in front of us. We're all on this journey for at least a year from inception. So anything that is needed from us by the council going forward, of course, we'll still be around for that and potentially have meetings and other public outreach via TV, print, digital, or radio media, which will all happen certainly around the release of the final report. Commissioner Hill, do you have any more to report on stakeholder engagement?
No, just to say that we will note in the report all of the different groups that we met with in terms of community meetings, neighborhood associations, other organizations, the dates of those meetings, and as well all of our official public meetings. And we will also note the number of public comments that were submitted for each of the public meetings. And I believe all of that will also be available on the record for anybody to review.
Thank you. Any other commissioners have comments about the engagement, stakeholder engagement? I know, Paul, you were still trying to get some meetings scheduled.
Yeah, there was one left that we've been trying hard to get, the Holly Grove neighborhood. We postponed. It was just going to be a phone meeting right this evening. Actually, it was going to be at 6 o'clock, but I recommended and they agreed that we needed to get through this meeting and then I'm going to go back to them and tell them what we've decided and what our recommendations are. It really is the general Ogden 4th Street issue. And if they still want to have a meeting and want us to engage, I will absolutely set it up and I'll let you know.
I greatly appreciate it. I think that Commissioner Raymond also had some he was trying to set up.
Yeah.
Are those still in play, Commissioner Raymond?
Yes, with the Fairgrounds Neighborhood Association and the Seabrook Neighborhood Association.
So Mark, were those the ones you were going to do on Monday? Were you combining those?
Yep, because it wasn't a lot of people.
Okay, if you could just send me that just so that I have it for the record. I need to know the names of those targeted groups for that meeting.
Okay, I will.
Great, thank you.
And again, I'd just like to remind commissioners, but as well as the public, we have another meeting scheduled, excuse me, 2 weeks from now. And if we have any new information, suggestions, things that we want to bring up again for reconsideration at that meeting, we certainly will do that. There's still room. And beyond that, of course, as we were reminded earlier by Sue Mobley, when the process leaves us, when we give the final report of recommendations to the council, your advocacy doesn't end with us. You still can go to the council members, have conversations with them about the recommendations, because at the end of the day, the final decision is up to those council members about what they will or won't do. And then they're the ones who kick off the process with the City Planning Commission in places where they see it's appropriate to do that. I also want to remind the public, because we consistently get these comments about the cost of doing it, that this is all being done with an eye to fiscal responsibility. The council will look at the cost of doing these things and weigh that as it decides whether or not it's going to do streets and whether or not, or the timing rather, for doing those streets as well. So, just because we make recommendations today doesn't mean that, this is going to happen tomorrow and, tax dollars are going to go into making those changes. And obviously all the conditions of the day will be weighed in, as we recognize today that we have some city workers who are working at less than their regular salary and now overtime. So we understand that there are other decisions that the council has to make and determine as they go forward with this movement. Are there any, we'll move on to, or were there any comments on that section, Andrew?
Yeah, we have 7 comments on that section. Paul, I can handle these. First comment is by Colin Davis, not a paid representative. This entire process seems to be nothing more than a political stunt. When I drive around Lee Circle, the name of the street is far less of an issue than dozens, hundreds of homeless people living under the nearby overpass. Why are you wasting taxpayer time and money on this renaming idiocy? Who do you think you are helping besides yourselves and your own political image? For the love of human kindness, please stop this foolishness and work on helping your citizens. Next comment is by William Murphy, not a paid representative. I want to thank the commission members for continuing to push forward with this important part of the effort to defeat the bigoted violence we face in the city, state, and country. Now more than ever, it is time to stop honoring violent individuals and defy the hate of those who still fetishize the power of that violence. Let's create a better future for all by honoring those who have and those who will continue to pursue the goals of a more inclusive and more just culture. Next comment is by Rachel Jordan, not a paid representative. Changing the name of General Patton Street, George Patton, to a less controversial figure that represents the way forward. New name should include people who have fought without reservation to include people versus exclusion. Suggested name for the street, Nils Douglas. Next comment is by Thomas Hughes, not a paid representative. I don't believe the commission have fully engaged enough stakeholders in their work. This will result in more and more people just believing that New Orleans has lost their culture and competitive advantage of the city they used to have. Next comment is by Mary Meising Gubala, not a paid representative. Once again, I would like to advocate for homeowners, renters, and businesses along the streets that are proposed for renaming. Before consideration of renaming of additional 37 streets, has an analysis been done of the renaming of Jefferson Davis to Norman Francis? This could serve as a house-by-house case study to assess how many residents, 1, knew about the name change initially being discussed, 2, that the name was changed, 3, received a postcard itemizing the agencies they needed to notify about their street name change, 4, what additional agencies or items have to be notified and or changed, 5, how have they done those notifications or changes, 6, how much time or money have those changes cost them. I believe it is grossly unfair to subject our residents to these time and money expenditures. Additionally, it is grossly irresponsible of our city to be spending time and money when we have major issues to deal with like crime, drainage, and streets, not to mention a pandemic. The next comment is by Charles Versala, not a paid representative. Dear council members, regarding stakeholder engagement, I suggest you have a formal application for group or stakeholders to apply for engagement with the commission. Stakeholders are not limited to neighborhood associations. The Italian community would like to meet with you as we feel this action of renaming streets was to remedy the treatment of immigrant groups and we are not being engaged. No remedy is being given. Rather, you are looking to remove Tivoli Circle. We question why that fact has been hidden from us. A second group of stakeholders to engage would be U.S. military veterans. The proposal for Victory Place at Tivoli Circle is to honor veterans, those currently serving and those who died while serving. 80 cities in Louisiana have Blue Star markers and gardens. New Orleans does not. Yet New Orleans has a VA hospital, military base, and National World War II Museum. What does this say about respecting our veterans? You are deciding and recommending a means to remember U.S. soldiers, many of whose careers placed them in several wars fighting for our country, not just the conflict of 1861-1865. It is clear that Louisiana popular vote was 19,000 to 17,000 to secede. After that, thousands were drafted and died away home. They were defending their state against an enemy that believed in burning down homes, building shipping docks and train stations. And in the case of Alexandria and Richmond, Louisiana, the Union Army blowing the whole town to the ground. Many of those veterans had children and other descendants who served in the U.S. military in World War, Korea, Vietnam, and the Middle East. I encourage your stakeholder community, stakeholder outreach to include U.S. military veterans. The final comment is by Melvin Schneider, not a paid representative. Please review the historical research that Lane, Bragg, Mouton, and Walker Streets in Lakeview are named for Mexican War Service. Folks in Lakeview do not want to see streets in their neighborhoods renamed. I live in a block bound by Walker and Mouton and respectfully request that you remove the streets from the list for change. Research and public opinion of our neighborhood is that everything be left based on all of my neighbors I talk to, so please respect engagement in the community and recommend no changes there. Attached is some research associated with street names throughout Lakeview, and there is a link to the PDF. And that is all the public comment.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Is there any comment or question by the commission members on that comment? Hearing none, we'll move to item 8, other matters. Are there any other matters the commissioners would like to discuss?
All right, sorry, Commissioner, other matters is actually not on the agenda anymore.
Oh, okay. Then let's skip that one and move to adjournment. If there is no further business, we have concluded our agenda and I declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you all. I really appreciate the long haul meetings we've had the last few, but it is absolutely necessary for us to take these comments in and have them read into the record where possible and show the public that, they're not doing things in vain. And I know I speak for the rest of you, even the comments that are misleading and or misinformed still help us in our process because it keeps us on our toes basically and makes us make sure that what we're doing is the right thing under the ordinance that we were made under. So, I greatly appreciate you all's time and your efforts in this because you did a lot of work before we ever got to this meeting to be ready for it. We still have more to go, so I encourage you all to on our toes basically and makes us stick with me a little bit longer. We have a meeting in 2 weeks, so over the next couple of weeks, bring back all the information that you need if we need to do some reconsideration so we can make those things happen accordingly. And we'll get everything we need to the city council so that they can move forward from here. So thank you all again and have a very pleasant evening. Thank you very much to the workers from the city. I really do appreciate it. I know what it is like to work beyond your work hours, but you all do this way more than just with this meeting. I don't think enough people recognize that because we like to see the inconvenience of city government more than we do the sacrifices that happen in the building. So, just acknowledging that we are truly appreciative of it. We are running this commission on minimal budget and stretching you all beyond what you normally do. So we greatly appreciate that. Thank you very much and have a good night.
Thank you very much, everyone.